Wherever you are in the world, whether nestled under blankets or curled up on a couch, I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is by you. Is it late evening? Early morning? Somewhere beautifully in between? Feel free to share it in the comments below, and if you enjoy gently drifting into the world of science with a calm voice and a curious mind, a like and a subscribe would mean the world. It helps the channel grow and tells the algorithm that sleep and science actually do get along quite nicely. Now, tonight's topic might be just curious enough to keep you awake a little longer than planned. If that happens, I sincerely apologise for the inconvenience of accidentally teaching you something. I'll do my best to strike a balance between fascinating and gently snoozy, but no promises. You've probably heard of sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. But those are just the headliners. Beneath them lie a whole orchestra of quieter senses, like how you always know where your arms and legs are, even with your eyes closed, or how your stomach growls, your cheeks flush, or your inner ear warns you when you're about to fall over. These aren't magical powers or subconscious whispers. They're built-in features of the human body working around the clock in the background, rarely noticed unless something goes wrong. So tonight, we're going to take a slow and calming journey into those hidden human senses, the ones you might not think about, but use every moment of every day. Think of it as a peaceful walk through the back hallways of your own nervous system. No pressure to stay awake for all of it. The body, after all, knows how to take care of itself, even when the mind drifts off. And finally, while tonight's exploration is based on scientific research, it's intended for relaxation and education only. Nothing in this video is medical advice. Always speak with a qualified professional about any health concerns. Now, if you're ready, let's quietly begin. Once upon a time, about 2,300 years ago, give or take a philosophical scroll, there lived a man named Aristotle. You may have heard of him. He had some big ideas. He was into biology, ethics, poetry, logic, and apparently sensory perception. He looked at the world and decided that humans had 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. That's it. 5 neatly packaged ways to experience reality. No more, no less. Clean, simple, and very ancient Greek. And remarkably, that number stuck. It travelled through time, wove its way through medieval manuscripts, nestled into Renaissance classrooms, and made itself quite at home in modern school books. Even now, many of us are taught as children that we have just those 5. It's a comforting idea. Easy to memorise, easy to list, and pleasingly tidy. The hand has 5 fingers, we have 5 senses. Symmetry. But like many tidy ideas from antiquity, it turns out to be delightfully incomplete. Because the truth is, the human body is far more nuanced than that. Aristotle was brilliant, yes, but he didn't have access to brain scans, nerve maps, or lab rats. He didn't know about the inner workings of the spinal cord, or how fluid sloshing around in your ears helps you stand upright. He certainly didn't know how you can feel your stomach churn when you're nervous, or why you sense the weight of your own arm even in the dark. These are sensations too, real, measurable, deeply important ones. But they don't make it into the classic 5. So why has this 5-sense idea held on for so long? Partly it's historical inertia. Once a concept gets repeated enough, it settles in. School systems adopted it, textbooks repeated it, and by the time anyone thought to update the list, it had already turned into common sense. Culturally, we like our categories to be small and manageable. It's easier to build lesson plans and catchy graphics with 5 pieces than with, say, 17. And yes, some researchers estimate that we have at least 17 distinct senses. Some stretch the list into the 20s. It all depends on how you define a sense. Is it a specific kind of receptor? A unique neural pathway? A conscious experience? Scientists debate the technicalities, but one thing is certain. 5 is just the tip of the iceberg. Take balance, for instance. You're not consciously aware of it most of the time, but without your vestibular system, tiny structures in your inner ear that detect motion and orientation, you'd be falling over constantly. It's not touch. It's not sight. It's a standalone system, quietly working in the background, helping you move through space. Or consider pain. It's often lumped in with touch, but that's like calling smoke a kind of breeze. Touch tells you that something is brushing your skin. Pain tells you that something is wrong. Pain has its own specialized nerve endings called nociceptors. They detect damage, heat, pressure, chemicals, and send urgent messages up your spinal cord to alert the brain. It's unpleasant, but essential. Without pain, you'd never know when to pull your hand off a hot stove. Then there's temperature. Feeling hot or cold isn't just a matter of whether something is touching you. It's about detecting energy. You have dedicated thermoreceptors in your skin and body that sense temperature changes, both on the surface and deep within. That icy chill running down your back, not part of the classic 5, but very much a sense. Stretch is another quiet contributor. Your muscles and tendons contain specialized sensors that constantly monitor tension and length. These help coordinate your movements, prevent injury, and keep you from overstretching. You can thank them every time you reach for something on a high shelf without pulling a muscle, or at least most of the time. Body position, what scientists call proprioception, is perhaps the most underrated of all. It's how you can touch your finger to your nose with your eyes closed. It's the reason you don't need to look at your feet when you walk. Deep in your joints and muscles are receptors that send your brain constant updates about where your limbs are. This map of your body is continuously refreshed moment by moment without you ever noticing it. Lose it, and even the simplest movement becomes a conscious effort. And then there's interoception, the sense of what's happening inside your body. Are you hungry? Is your heart beating fast? Do you need to use the bathroom? Are you breathing deeply enough? All of these sensations are gathered and delivered to your brain via a complex web of internal sensors. They don't appear on the tip of your tongue or the surface of your skin, but they're crucial to your survival and well-being. When you begin to add it all up, the traditional 5 senses start to look more like a greatest hits album. Popular, memorable, but hardly the whole story. The full sensory picture is far more expansive, textured, and quietly extraordinary. And it's not just about having more senses, it's about how these lesser-known ones shape the way you experience being human. They help you navigate the world, avoid danger, stay upright, interpret emotions, and maintain a sense of identity. They're the behind-the-scenes crew keeping the whole performance running smoothly. Interestingly, some of these senses don't necessarily give rise to vivid conscious experiences. You don't always feel your proprioception unless you focus on it. You don't usually think about your balance until it's disrupted. And yet they are just as real, just as active, and just as vital. That's part of what makes them hidden. Not invisible, but unnoticed. Of course, we do still use the classic 5 senses every day. Sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell are vivid and immediate. But they're just the opening act. Beneath them hums a complex orchestra of other signals, quieter but no less important. There's a certain humility that comes with realizing how much of your experience relies on things you never think about. The body, in its wisdom, handles the details so you don't have to. But once you start to notice those details, the little pulses, balances, stretches, and signals, it opens up a new layer of appreciation for how endlessly intricate you really are. So while Aristotle gave us a lovely framework, the modern understanding of the senses is far richer. What we call the hidden senses aren't hidden from science, only from everyday attention. And once you begin to notice them, even softly, the world within becomes just as fascinating as the world outside. Imagine standing in a dark room, eyes closed, reaching up to touch the tip of your nose. You don't miss. You don't have to search around your face like you're playing a strange game of blindfolded hide and seek. You just know where your hand is and where your nose is, and your body brings the two together with a sort of quiet, invisible choreography. This seemingly simple act is actually an incredible example of a hidden superpower known as proprioception. Proprioception is your brain's internal GPS for your body. It's the sense that tells you where your limbs are in space, how they're moving, and how much effort your muscles are using, all without needing to look. Unlike vision or hearing, which rely on stimuli from the outside world, proprioception is entirely internal. It's your body's way of keeping track of itself. The word comes from Latin roots, proprius, meaning one's own, and ception, meaning perception. So proprioception is quite literally the perception of one's own self. But not in a poetic existential way, more in a my foot is behind me and slightly to the right kind of way. If you've never thought about this sense before, that's probably because it works so reliably. It's always on in the background, updating your brain about your body's position like a weather app that never crashes. You don't have to think about bending your knee before taking a step, or adjusting your hand to grasp a mug. You just do it. Unless something goes wrong, proprioception is gloriously forgettable. At the heart of proprioception are specialized sensors nestled deep within your muscles, joints, and tendons. These include muscle spindles, which detect changes in muscle length, and Golgi tendon organs, which monitor tension. These sensors constantly feed data up through the spinal cord to your brain, especially to a region called the cerebellum, which plays a key role in fine-tuning movement and balance. It's a bit like having a backstage team of biomechanical technicians working around the clock. To put it in simpler terms, proprioception is how your body knows where everything is without peeking. If your brain is the conductor of a symphony, proprioception is the way it knows where all the instruments are even if the lights go out. There are some classic examples that help illustrate just how impressive this system is. Touching your nose with your eyes closed is a fun party trick for the inner neuroscientist in all of us. Walking down a hallway at night without bumping into the walls? That's proprioception guiding your steps. Typing on a keyboard without looking? Also proprioception. Even something as casual as scratching your back relies on your brain's understanding of spatial positioning and movement coordination. Of course, not everyone has flawless proprioception. If you've ever tripped over your own foot or smacked your elbow on a doorframe you weren't expecting, congratulations, you found the limits of your internal GPS. And if you're wondering how animals compare to us in this department, allow me to introduce the feline gold standard. Cats are, for lack of a better word, smugly graceful. They leap, twist, land, and slink their way through narrow spaces with an elegance that borders on sorcery. Their proprioceptive skills are off the charts. Ever watched a cat leap from a countertop to a windowsill with barely a wiggle on the landing? That's proprioception dialed to expert mode. Meanwhile, we humans stub our toes on coffee tables that haven't moved in 3 years. One of the most extreme examples of what happens when proprioception fails comes from rare neurological cases where people lose this sense almost entirely. There's a documented case of a man named Ian Waterman who lost all proprioceptive feedback from the neck down due to a viral infection that damaged his sensory nerves. He was left unable to feel where his limbs were unless he looked directly at them. Walking became a deliberate, highly visual process, and even something like buttoning a shirt required intense concentration. He had to relearn movement by substituting vision for internal feedback. It's a powerful reminder of just how essential this hidden sense is to daily life. Another interesting tidbit is that proprioception can be trained and refined. Athletes, dancers, martial artists, all of them rely heavily on body awareness. Gymnasts, for instance, perform flips in midair while knowing exactly how to land, based largely on proprioceptive cues. Likewise, balance and movement therapies often involve exercises to enhance this sense, especially after injury or neurological trauma. Even yoga and tai chi, often associated with relaxation, are sneaky proprioception workouts. Holding a pose, adjusting your weight, sensing your alignment, all of that taps into this subtle body mapping system. When someone says they feel more in tune with their body after such activities, they're often referring, at least in part, to heightened proprioceptive awareness. Interestingly, alcohol has a way of temporarily scrambling the sense. That wobbly gait and inability to judge the distance between your face and the doorframe, That's your brain's internal GPS glitching out. Proprioception and coordination are tightly linked, which is why even a small disruption can make movements feel clumsy or disconnected. Proprioception doesn't work alone though. It often teams up with the other senses to give your brain a fuller picture of your body in space. Vision, touch, balance, and even hearing contribute to this symphony of awareness. But proprioception holds a special place because it works even in the absence of external input. It gives you a sense of body ownership, of continuity, of control. It's how you know you are where you are. Some researchers argue that proprioception is also part of the foundation for more complex concepts like self-awareness. Your body isn't just something you inhabit, it's something you feel from the inside out without needing to look. That sense of being located somewhere, of having a personal space defined by limbs and movement, is deeply tied to this hidden feedback system. It's worth appreciating how elegantly this all operates. Each step you take, each gesture you make, is monitored and guided by a vast, silent network of sensors and neurons. It's happening right now as you shift under your blanket, tilt your head, or reach for a glass of water. You're participating in a sensory dialogue that began long before you were born and will continue long after you fall asleep tonight. And while cats might still have us beat on the graceful landings, we humans have something just as marvellous. An entire sense we rarely notice, but would be lost without. It's not flashy, and it won't win any popularity contest with sight or sound. But it's working around the clock to keep you upright, coordinated, and wonderfully, quietly aware of where you are. There's a quiet language your body speaks, one that doesn't involve words, visuals, or even much noise. It's the murmur of your heartbeat, the tightening in your stomach before lunch, the slow expansion of your lungs as you breathe in deeply. These aren't thoughts, they're sensations, messages from the inside out. This silent stream of bodily awareness is made possible by a remarkable sense called interoception. Interoception is your ability to perceive the internal state of your body. While proprioception tells you where your limbs are in space, interoception tells you how things are going inside. Are you hungry? Is your bladder full? Are you warm or cold? Is your heart racing? Are you breathing too fast or not quite enough? These are all examples of interoceptive awareness. It's your internal dashboard, constantly updating your brain with real-time information about the condition of your organs, tissues and fluids, without needing your permission or participation. You've experienced this sense countless times without knowing its name. That dry tickle in your throat telling you to sip some water. Interoception. The butterflies in your stomach before a big event. Interoception again. Even your awareness of fatigue after a long day, or the content sigh that comes after a satisfying meal. Those are all messages from within. At the heart of interoception is a beautifully complex system of sensory neurons that monitor internal conditions throughout the body. These receptors live in your heart, lungs, gut, bladder, muscles, and skin. They send information via nerves, especially the vagus nerve, up to the brain, where it's processed in regions like the insular cortex. That's one of the brain's primary centers for building an integrated picture of the body's internal landscape. It's the part of you that says, "Ah, yes, my stomach is making that noise again." Interestingly, interoception doesn't always scream for attention. In fact, most of the time it whispers. It's subtle. The signals are there, but they rarely rise to the level of full-blown awareness unless something changes significantly, like extreme hunger, sudden pain, or the urgent need to find a bathroom. For the most part, interoception is a background hum, keeping your brain informed without causing much of a fuss. But just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's unimportant. In fact, interoception plays a central role in regulating your body's homeostasis, the internal balance that keeps everything functioning smoothly. When your blood sugar dips, your body nudges your brain with hunger signals. When your temperature rises, it triggers sweating. When your heart rate climbs during stress, Interoception helps you recognize the change and ideally calm down. Without this system, you'd be a little like a car without dashboard lights, still running, but unaware of when something needs attention. One of the more fascinating aspects of interoception is how it links the body and the mind. Emotions, for instance, are deeply interwoven with interoceptive signals. That racing heart during anxiety, that fluttering gut during excitement, that lump in the throat during sadness. These aren't just metaphors, they're physical sensations your brain interprets as emotional states. In fact, some researchers argue that emotions begin as interoceptive experiences and our minds simply label them afterward. Your brain detects a shift in your body and goes, must be nervous, or this feels like happiness. This brain-body loop is constant and bidirectional. Your body informs your mind, and your mind can, in turn, influence your body. Thinking about something stressful can make your stomach clench. Relaxing your breath can slow your heart rate. It's an elegant feedback system, one that allows for regulation, adaptation, and self-awareness. And the better your interoceptive skills, the more attuned you are to subtle shifts in mood, energy, and well-being. But not everyone experiences interoception in the same way. Some people are highly sensitive to their internal signals. They can detect tiny changes in heartbeat, notice the first hint of dehydration, or recognize emotional changes just as they begin. Others are less tuned in. In some clinical cases, people can even lose touch with their internal states entirely, making it difficult to recognize when they're hungry, tired, or emotionally overwhelmed. On the other end of the spectrum, some people experience heightened interoception, which can be overwhelming. Individuals with anxiety disorders, for example, may be acutely aware of their heart rate or breathing patterns, which can make normal sensations feel alarming. A racing heart that most people would ignore might feel like a full-blown emergency. The brain amplifies the signal, misinterprets it, and the feedback loop spirals into distress. Understanding interoception can help explain why some people feel more in their body than others, and why mindfulness practices can be so effective at calming the nervous system. Breath in particular is one of the most powerful gateways into interoception. Unlike most bodily processes, breathing is both automatic and controllable. You breathe without thinking, but you can also take control at any time. This unique feature makes it a perfect anchor for awareness. Focusing on the breath can heighten interoceptive sensitivity, calm the nervous system, and provide a sense of grounding. It's no wonder that nearly every meditative or contemplative tradition involves paying attention to the breath. It's the closest thing we have to a manual override button for the body's internal rhythm. Interoception also plays a critical role in developmental stages. From infancy, babies begin to form an internal model of their bodies by sensing hunger, discomfort, and fullness. Over time, these sensations become more refined and integrated with emotional states. As children grow, their interoceptive awareness helps them understand when they need rest, when they're upset, or when something's physically wrong. It's not just about recognizing a rumbling stomach. It's about connecting bodily sensations to thoughts, behaviors, and self-care. In recent years, researchers have begun exploring interoception in relation to mental health and neurological conditions. For example, people on the autism spectrum often show differences in interoceptive processing, which can affect emotional regulation and bodily awareness. Similarly, individuals with depression or eating disorders may have disrupted interoceptive signals, leading to distorted perceptions of hunger, fatigue, or emotion. Understanding and improving interoceptive skills may offer new ways to support well-being and self-regulation across a wide range of conditions. But even in the absence of clinical concerns, cultivating interoception can be a powerful tool for self-understanding. It's a practice of tuning in, quietly, gently, to what's happening beneath the surface. It's noticing your heartbeat when you're still. It's realizing that you're more tired than you thought. It's being able to differentiate between true hunger and boredom. It's the inner whisper that says, you might want to stretch your legs, or that second cup of coffee probably wasn't necessary. And while this sense may not be as dramatic as sight or sound, it's no less essential. In fact, you could argue that it's one of the most foundational senses of all. It gives you a lived sense of being in a body, not just occupying it, but experiencing it. It's what turns a biological machine into a felt, embodied life. You may not hear it often, but interoception is always speaking. And when you learn to listen, even just a little, it can tell you some remarkably useful things. Take a moment and sit as still as you can. Even in this calm position, your body is balancing a symphony of signals to keep you upright. You're not tipping over, your head isn't wobbling, and you probably haven't given much thought to the invisible systems that are quietly making this happen. One of the key players behind the curtain? Your inner ears. Yes, those two little curled structures buried deep in your skull are doing far more than helping you hear the world. They're also helping you not fall off your chair. Inside each ear is a tiny, remarkable system responsible for your sense of balance. It's called the vestibular system, and it's what allows you to walk in a straight line, stand on one foot, or gracefully step over the corner of a rug without toppling like a confused giraffe. While we often credit our muscles or vision for these feats, much of the balance magic comes from this lesser-known, fluid-filled marvel. At the core of the vestibular system are two main components, the semicircular canals and the otolith organs. Don't let the names scare you. They're easier to picture than you might expect. First, the semicircular canals. Imagine three tiny curved tubes arranged roughly like the rings of a gyroscope, one for each major direction of head movement, up and down, side to side, and tilt. These canals are filled with a fluid called endolymph and lined with tiny hair-like cells that can detect movement. When you move your head, say, nodding in agreement or shaking it in disbelief, the fluid inside these canals shifts. That movement bends the little hairs, which then send electrical signals to your brain saying, "Hey, we're moving!" This is how your brain knows not just that you moved, but how you moved, your direction, speed, and rotation. It's a real-time navigation system powered by liquid physics and microscopic hair cells. Your brain integrates this information with signals from your eyes and muscles to keep you oriented. It's constantly updating, even when you're just turning your head to look at a squirrel outside the window. Then there are the otolith organs, which are just as fun to imagine. These are small structures called the utricle and the saccule. They're sensitive to gravity and linear acceleration, meaning they tell your brain whether you're tilting, standing still, or accelerating forward, like when a car takes off. Inside these organs are tiny crystals called otoconia, suspended in a jelly-like fluid. When you move or tilt your head, gravity tugs on these crystals and they shift slightly. The movement bends nearby hair cells, which again send signals to your brain. Between the canals and the otoliths, your brain is getting an up-to-the-minute report on your head's position in three-dimensional space. And because your head is firmly attached to your body, hopefully, the rest of you benefits from this steady stream of orientation data. But what happens when this system gets thrown off? Dizziness. That disorienting, whirling sensation most of us have experienced at one point or another. Spinning around in circles as a child was fun precisely because it disrupted the vestibular system in a safe, predictable way. But the aftermath, when the world keeps spinning even after you've stopped, is your inner ear telling your brain, "We're still in motion," while your eyes disagree. This sensory mismatch creates the illusion of movement and leaves you feeling dizzy. What you're experiencing in those moments is a kind of temporary mutiny between your senses. Your semicircular canals are still sloshing around after the spin, sending motion signals, while your visual system reports a static world. Your brain, being the somewhat dramatic interpreter that it is, says, "Well, I don't know what's going on, but let's feel weird about it." This sensory disagreement is also at the heart of motion sickness. Picture yourself in a car reading a book. Your eyes are focused on the page, nothing is moving there, but your vestibular system can feel every turn, bump and acceleration. The result? A brain that's caught in the middle of conflicting messages. In evolutionary terms, this sort of sensory mismatch could have been interpreted as poison messing with your perception, hence the nausea. Your body thinks it's being tricked and tries to clear the decks. It's a bit overprotective. On the flip side, looking out the window in a moving car helps align your visual cues with the motion your inner ear feels. Suddenly, your senses agree. Yes, we're definitely moving, and your brain relaxes. This is why some people swear by staring at the horizon when they're queasy. Vertigo, a more persistent form of dizziness, often arises from disruptions in the vestibular system itself. Tiny calcium crystals can dislodge and float into one of the semicircular canals where they don't belong. This condition, called benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or BPPV for short, can make lying down or rolling over in bed feel like the room is spinning. Thankfully, there are physical maneuvers that can help reposition these stray crystals, kind of like gently shaking a snow globe until the flakes settle again. The vestibular system can also be affected by inflammation, infections, or injury. People with vestibular neuritis, for example, experience sudden, intense vertigo due to swelling of the vestibular nerve. It's disorienting, exhausting, and can last for days. Your brain tries to compensate, but like an office worker trying to run things without the internet, it struggles when information from the inner ear suddenly goes silent. On a day-to-day basis, most people don't consciously notice their vestibular system working. But its effects are everywhere. When you reach down without falling over, when you walk across uneven ground, when you balance on one foot just for fun. Even maintaining an upright posture while sitting still is a quiet dance between gravity and inner ear guidance. And for those who engage in activities that push the boundaries of balance, acrobats, figure skaters, astronauts, the vestibular system becomes a trained partner. In space, for instance, astronauts often experience space motion sickness during their first few days in zero gravity. Without gravity to anchor the otolith organs, the brain has to adapt to a whole new set of rules. Fortunately, the human brain is wonderfully adaptable, and most astronauts adjust within a few days. There's also some evidence that we can improve our vestibular awareness through practice. Balance exercises, yoga, tai chi, and certain forms of physical therapy can all enhance vestibular function. It's a bit like recalibrating your internal compass, making it sharper and more reliable. While we often take balance for granted, losing it even briefly reminds us of how deeply we rely on it. A stumble, a spin, a sudden shift in the ground beneath us, all highlight how much this quiet sense does to stabilize our world. The vestibular system is a guardian of orientation, helping us feel grounded even when the world moves around us. Next time you tilt your head or step off a curb without incident, you can thank the little engineers in your ears, sloshing fluid, tumbling crystals and whispering nerve endings, working together to keep you from falling into the furniture. It's a marvel of biology, humming along unnoticed until something throws it off. And even then, it's trying its best to set you straight. Your muscles are chatty creatures, not in a loud or dramatic way, but with a constant stream of quiet updates to your brain. They're always sending little messages about stretch, pressure and tension. Like co-workers who never take a break, reporting in from every joint, limb and tendon. And whether you're lifting a cup of tea, reaching behind your back or just adjusting your pillow, these messages help your body move smoothly, safely and with a surprising amount of grace. At the center of this system are two remarkable types of sensors, muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. They sound like characters from a biology-themed mystery novel, but they're actually your built-in movement monitors, tiny, tucked away, and tirelessly diligent. Let's start with the muscle spindles. These are found inside your skeletal muscles, wrapped around the muscle fibers themselves. Their job is to detect changes in muscle length. Imagine you're reaching overhead to grab something off a shelf. As the muscle stretches, the spindle stretches too, and fires off signals to your spinal cord and brain saying, "Hey, we're getting longer over here." Your nervous system uses that information to coordinate movement, fine-tune control, and avoid overextension. This is part of what makes your movement so fluid. Your body doesn't just command a muscle to contract and hope for the best. It continuously checks in on how that muscle is behaving, like a live feedback loop. If a muscle is stretching too quickly, say you suddenly slip on a patch of ice, your muscle spindles trigger a reflex contraction to stop you from overextending or injuring yourself. This is the same principle behind the knee-jerk reaction tested at the doctor's office. A quick tap stretches the tendon, the spindle fires, and the leg kicks out automatically. Now enter the Golgi tendon organs, the muscle spindle's quieter cousins. These sensors are located where muscle meets tendon, and they specialize in detecting tension. How much force is being generated during a contraction? They're your internal strain gauges. When tension becomes too high, these organs can inhibit the muscle's activity, essentially telling it to take a break before things snap or tear. It's your body's way of enforcing a little self-care before injury strikes. Together, muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs form a kind of internal radar system. One monitors how long a muscle is getting, and the other checks how hard it's working. Between them, they provide moment-to-moment information that allows your brain to coordinate everything from the graceful to the awkward. Without them, you'd be guessing how far your arm could stretch, or how much pressure you were applying to a doorknob, or whether you were pulling too hard on a stubborn drawer. This constant flow of information also explains how your body knows when to stop. Let's say you're doing a forward bend, reaching toward your toes. As your hamstrings stretch, the muscle spindles notice the lengthening and let your brain know what's happening. Meanwhile, as the tension builds, the Golgi tendon organs weigh in with their assessment. If the stretch is slow and gentle, the brain gives the green light. But if you bounce too fast or push too hard, those same sensors send a signal saying, "Let's not do something we'll regret." You ease off, perhaps instinctively, because your body is looking out for itself in real time. This relationship becomes especially interesting in activities like yoga. When you settle into a pose and breathe through a stretch, you're not just elongating muscles, you're gradually desensitizing those stretch receptors. The muscle spindle adapt to the new length, and the Golgi tendon organs become less alarmed. With consistent practice, this leads to improved flexibility, not because your muscles are being forced to change, but because your nervous system is learning to trust the process. You're essentially training your stretch sensors to chill out. Body awareness, sometimes called kinesthetic sense, owes a great deal to this system of internal monitoring. It's the reason you can hold a steady pose, adjust your limbs in space, and sense when something feels just a little off. Think about balancing on one leg with your eyes closed. You're relying on constant feedback from your muscles and tendons to make micro adjustments, maintain posture, and prevent tipping. It's a quiet ballet of tension and release, governed by sensors that never sleep. This sense also plays a role in strength training and physical therapy. When you lift weights, your muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs are watching every movement. If a muscle is under too much strain, the nervous system will reduce the force output to protect the tissue. Over time, with safe, gradual training, the threshold for that reflex adjusts, allowing you to lift heavier loads. Your muscles grow stronger not just from effort, but from a recalibration of the sensors that govern effort. And while these systems are generally automatic, you can develop a greater awareness of them through intentional movement. Dancers, gymnasts, martial artists, and athletes often talk about listening to their body, a poetic way of saying they've tuned into the internal dialogue of stretch, tension, and control. They know when a muscle is reaching its limit, when a joint is aligned just right, or when something feels subtly wrong. This intuition is built on thousands of hours of feedback, adjustment, and learning. Even without years of training, most people have an intuitive sense of muscle tension. We say we're holding stress in our shoulders, or tight in the hips, and often we're right. Emotional states can influence muscle tone and vice versa. Anxiety may lead to a clenched jaw or raised shoulders. Calmness might soften the tension. These changes are not imagined. They're felt through real shifts in muscular activation, picked up by those same stretch and tension sensors. Interestingly, people recovering from injuries often have to retrain this system. When pain or trauma alters movement patterns, the brain can start ignoring or misinterpreting signals from certain muscles. Physical therapists work to rebuild these pathways, reintroducing the brain to accurate stretch and tension feedback. It's like teaching a familiar language all over again. Some neurological conditions can disrupt this feedback loop entirely. For example, damage to the spinal cord or certain types of neuropathy can prevent stretch and tension signals from reaching the brain. The result is often a loss of coordination or difficulty performing even simple tasks, not because the muscles are weak, but because the brain isn't getting the data it needs to guide them. It's a stark reminder of how much we rely on these invisible systems. On a lighter note, this whole system is also the reason some stretches feel so satisfyingly good. When you reach your arms overhead and yawn, part of the pleasure comes from activating those muscle spindles in a gentle, controlled way. Your body likes being reminded of its full range, likes being stretched and moved and listened to. It's a quiet form of internal communication that says, "I'm still here and everything's working." Even something as simple as changing positions in bed, rolling to one side, stretching your legs out, or curling into a ball is accompanied by a flurry of signals from your stretch and tension receptors. They help your brain track the new posture, adjust muscle tone, and prepare for the next dreamy moment of stillness. It's easy to forget that every movement, from a powerful jump to a lazy stretch, is informed by countless tiny measurements happening below your awareness. Your muscles are always talking, not in complaints or groans, but in steady streams of data. They're telling your brain how long, how hard, how far, and when to ease off. It's a gentle conversation between effort and ease, motion and rest. And in that conversation, there's a kind of quiet intelligence, one that you don't have to think about, but that's always there, patient, responsive, and perfectly tuned to the art of moving through the world without falling apart. Pain doesn't exactly have the best reputation. It's rarely invited to parties, seldom appreciated in the moment, and usually gets lumped into the bad things we try to avoid category. But pain, for all its unpleasantness, is not just a feeling, it's a full-fledged sense. And just like sight, sound, or balance, it serves a vital function. Without it, life would be far more dangerous, far less manageable, and strangely dull. To call pain a sense is to acknowledge that it involves real sensory input, transmitted through specialized pathways and interpreted by the brain. You feel pain when certain receptors in your body, called nociceptors, detect damage or the threat of damage. These receptors are scattered throughout your skin, muscles, joints, and even some internal organs. They don't care about temperature unless it's extreme. They don't care about pressure unless it's crushing. They are picky, but when they do respond, they're loud. Nociceptors come in different varieties, tuned to different kinds of trouble. Some respond to sharp injuries, others to burning heat or freezing cold, and still others to chemical signals that arise during inflammation. They send electrical impulses through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and up into the brain, where the message is interpreted as ouch. This is not a vague emotional reaction. It's a highly specific alert system. Think of nociceptors as the smoke detectors of the body. You may not enjoy the alarm, but without it, you wouldn't know there was a fire. What's fascinating, and sometimes frustrating, is how flexible this system can be. Pain is not a fixed measurement. It's not like turning on a lamp where the light is either on or off. Pain is modulated by context, mood, attention, and previous experience. Two people can experience the same injury and report wildly different levels of pain, and even one person can experience the same injury in two different situations and feel more or less pain depending on stress, fatigue, or even expectation. There's a classic example of a soldier in combat who sustains a major injury, but doesn't feel pain until after the battle. In the moment, the brain prioritizes survival over sensation. Later, when the danger has passed, the pain arrives. This flexibility is one of pain's quirkiest features. It's not just about tissue damage, it's about how the brain interprets the threat. We often divide pain into two broad categories, acute and chronic. Acute pain is the kind you get when you stub your toe, burn your finger, or pull a muscle. It comes on suddenly, has a clear cause, and usually resolves once the injury heals. It's useful pain, the kind that keeps you from putting weight on a sprained ankle or reminds you to take it easy after surgery. In evolutionary terms, acute pain is a lifesaver. It encourages rest, caution, and healing. Chronic pain, on the other hand, is a more complicated guest. It sticks around long after the injury is gone, or sometimes appears without any obvious cause at all. Chronic pain can last for weeks, months, or even years. It may be due to nerve damage, inflammation, or a malfunction in the way the brain processes signals. And unlike acute pain, chronic pain doesn't always serve a protective function. It can become its own condition, reshaping the brain's wiring and colouring every aspect of a person's life. One of the more peculiar aspects of pain is how inconsistently it behaves. A paper cut can feel like a medieval curse, while a broken bone might register as a dull ache. This mismatch has puzzled scientists and annoyed patients for centuries. Why does something so minor feel so dramatic? The answer lies partly in nerve density. The fingertips, lips, and face are loaded with sensory receptors, including nociceptors. That's why a tiny cut on your finger feels more intense than a larger injury elsewhere. It's also why kissing a scraped knee feels soothing. There are fewer pain receptors and more distraction in the act. Of course, pain isn't just a physical sensation, it has emotional layers too. Anyone who's ever been through heartbreak knows that the phrase emotional pain isn't just a poetic metaphor. Studies using brain scans have shown that the same regions activated by physical pain, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, are also involved in processing social rejection or grief. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between a sprained ankle and a devastating breakup. Pain is pain, even if the source isn't visible. There are also rare and fascinating conditions where pain perception goes haywire. Take congenital insensitivity to pain, a genetic disorder in which people are born without the ability to feel pain. On the surface, it might sound like a superpower. No headaches, no stub toe agony, no discomfort at the dentist. But in reality, it's incredibly dangerous. Without pain as a guide, injuries go unnoticed and untreated. Children with this condition often suffer fractures, burns, and infections without realizing it. Pain may be unpleasant, but its absence is far worse. On the opposite end of the spectrum are conditions where pain is felt too intensely. One such disorder is called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Here, even a gentle touch can produce searing pain. The nerves become hypersensitive, and the pain system spirals into overdrive. These cases highlight how delicate and dynamic the pain system is. It's not a simple switch. It's more like a volume knob that can be turned up, down, or all the way to the wrong setting. Another fascinating pain oddity is phantom limb pain, experienced by amputees who feel pain in a limb that no longer exists. The brain's map of the body doesn't always update with reality, and it continues to receive, or generate, pain signals from an area that's no longer physically present. This suggests that pain, while often triggered by the body, is ultimately created in the brain. This brain-centered view of pain opens the door to all kinds of treatments that don't rely solely on medication. Cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, physical therapy, and even virtual reality are being used to retrain the brain's pain pathways. If the brain can learn to feel pain, it can also learn, in some cases, to feel less of it. And now let's address one of life's great mysteries: why a paper cut can feel so offensively painful, while the emotional weight of a Monday morning might just make you sigh and carry on. The paper cut is immediate, sharp, and highly localized. Your sensory receptors scream with clarity. The dread of existential reflection, however, tends to be slower, foggier, and more polite in its arrival. Both are real, both hurt, but only one is solved with a band-aid and some dramatic sighing. It's worth noting, too, that pain is often socially expressed. A grimace, a wince, a groan, these are ways of communicating distress to others. Evolutionary biologists suggest that this visible expression of pain helps build empathy in social groups. If someone limps into the village with a spear through their foot, the face they're making signals to everyone, "I need help." We learn pain behaviours early and often. A scraped knee as a child earns a hug and a reassuring voice. A headache as an adult might get you a quiet room and a cup of tea, if you're lucky. In the end, pain is a storyteller. It tells you when to stop, when to rest, when something needs attention. It's an ancient messenger with a very modern job, and while no one goes looking for it, pain is a reminder that you are a living, responsive, adaptable organism. That stubbed toe, that sore shoulder, even that paper cut, they're not just annoyances. They're signs that your senses are working, that your body is keeping watch, and that your brain is paying attention. Of all the hidden senses, pain is perhaps the loudest, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. It's not the villain. It's the alarm system, the guide, the teacher, albeit one with a slightly aggressive teaching style. There's something oddly satisfying about curling your hands around a warm mug on a cold day, or feeling that sharp, exhilarating jolt when your foot touches cool sheets at night. These are small, ordinary moments, but they're brought to life by a remarkable sense known as thermoception, the ability to feel temperature. It's not just about comfort or discomfort. It's a finely tuned system that helps your body navigate an ever-changing world of hot and cold. Thermoception is what lets you detect heat and chill on your skin, but it also goes much deeper than that. It helps regulate your internal temperature, tells you when to seek shade or a blanket, and even plays a role in how you interpret pain. It may not be as flashy as vision, or as lyrical as hearing, but without it, you'd struggle to survive more than a few hours in the real world. The science behind thermoception is both elegant and a little strange. It begins in the skin, which is dotted with specialized sensory receptors tuned specifically to changes in temperature. These receptors are part of a larger family of proteins called transient receptor potential channels, or TRP channels for short. Think of them as tiny molecular gatekeepers that open or close in response to specific stimuli. Some TRP channels respond to heat, others to cold, and some to things that feel hot or cold, even if they're not. For example, menthol from mint activates a cold-sensitive receptor called TRPM8, which is why mint makes your mouth feel cool. Capsaicin, the spicy compound in chili peppers, activates a heat-sensitive receptor called TRPV1, tricking your body into thinking it's been exposed to something hot. Your brain receives these chemical signals as if they were actual temperature changes, which is a bit like being fooled by a very convincing magician. These temperature-sensitive receptors send signals through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and eventually up to the brain, where they are interpreted as warmth or cold. But it's not just the surface of your skin that matters. Your brain also monitors core temperature deep inside the body, using receptors in areas like the hypothalamus. This region acts as your internal thermostat, maintaining a stable operating temperature somewhere around 37 degrees Celsius. If things drift too far from this sweet spot, your body initiates automatic responses to bring it back into balance, shivering to warm up, sweating to cool down. Interestingly, your body isn't equally sensitive all over. Some areas, like your hands, face and feet, are more thermally responsive than others. These zones are packed with thermoreceptors because they're the most exposed parts of your body. Your hands are the scouts that test the temperature of objects. Your face is the forward guard that feels the wind chill first, and your feet, for better or worse, are often the first to complain when you walk barefoot on a cold floor. Ever wonder why your fingers and toes seem to freeze long before the rest of you feels truly cold? That's because your body is incredibly protective of its core. When exposed to cold, blood vessels in your extremities constrict to reduce heat loss. It's a survival mechanism designed to preserve warmth around vital organs like your heart, lungs, and brain. Your limbs become expendable heat radiators, while your torso gets VIP treatment. It's not exactly democratic, but evolution tends to prioritize function over fairness. This is also why your skin can sometimes lie to you about the temperature of things. If you've ever stepped from a hot shower into a cool room and felt absolutely frozen, even if the air wasn't that cold, it's because your skin was acclimated to the higher temperature. It's not just measuring the temperature of the environment, it's comparing it to what you were feeling just moments ago. Thermoception isn't absolute, it's relative, and the brain loves a good contrast. Thermoception plays a role in behaviour too. It helps you decide what to wear, whether to seek shelter, and how long to stay in the sun. These might seem like small daily choices, but they're part of a much bigger evolutionary story. For early humans, detecting temperature changes could mean the difference between survival and hypothermia. A sudden drop in ambient temperature might signal an approaching storm, while excessive heat could warn of dehydration or heat stroke. Our ancestors didn't have thermometers, but their bodies came equipped with something better, a continuous internal weather report. And because we evolved outdoors, constantly exposed to the elements, our thermoceptive systems became incredibly sensitive. Even small changes in environmental temperature can cause noticeable shifts in how we feel. This sensitivity still serves us today, even though we spend most of our time in climate-controlled environments. A 2-degree difference in room temperature can make you reach for a sweater or kick off your blanket without thinking twice. One of the more surprising roles of thermoception is its overlap with emotion. Feeling warm isn't just a physical sensation, it's also associated with comfort, safety, and affection. Psychologists have found that physical warmth can influence how we perceive social warmth. Holding a hot drink can actually make people feel more generous or trusting. On the flip side, feeling cold can lead to emotional distance or reduced empathy. It's as if our brains have linked physical and emotional climates in a kind of symbolic shortcut. Some people have altered thermoceptive abilities, either due to genetics, injury, or neurological conditions. For example, individuals with certain forms of neuropathy might lose temperature sensitivity in their limbs, making them more prone to burns or frostbite. Others may be hypersensitive to temperature changes, reacting strongly to even mild variations. And in rare cases, the brain can misinterpret temperature signals entirely, leading to sensations of burning or freezing without any external cause, a condition known as thermal allodynia. There's also a curious link between thermoception and circadian rhythms. Your core body temperature naturally fluctuates throughout the day, usually dropping in the evening and rising in the morning. This dip in temperature helps signal that it's time to sleep, which is why a warm bath before bed can make it easier to drift off. The heat causes your blood vessels to expand, promoting a slight drop in core temperature afterward. Your body reads this as a cue to relax. It's a small trick of biology that doubles as a soothing bedtime ritual. Of course, thermoception isn't limited to humans. Many animals have specialized temperature detection systems. Snakes, for example, can see the heat signatures of prey using pit organs on their faces. Some fish detect subtle changes in water temperature to navigate or find food. Even bacteria can sense temperature gradients to move toward optimal environments. Across the tree of life, thermoception has evolved in wildly creative forms, each tailored to the needs of the organism. Back in the human world, we found ways to manipulate this sense for comfort and health. Heated blankets, cold compresses, cooling vests, infrared saunas, they all tap into our body's thermal response system. Cold therapy can reduce inflammation, while warmth can soothe muscle tension. Even spicy foods and peppermint candy rely on thermal illusions to create sensations that our brain reads as hot or cold. And yes, that's why eating a hot pepper can make you sweat. Capsaicin, the chemical responsible for the heat, binds to TRPV1 receptors in the mouth and tricks the brain into thinking your tongue is on fire. Your body responds the way it would to real heat, by trying to cool down. The sweating, the runny nose, the slight panic, it's all a response to a very clever deception. Thermoception may not demand your attention the way a bright light or a sudden sound might, but it's always working behind the scenes. It keeps you safe, comfortable and responsive to your environment. It helps you know when it's time to throw on a scarf, open a window, or enjoy that first warm sip of tea. It's easy to take it for granted, but feeling the world's temperature is one of the many quiet ways your body stays in sync with its surroundings. And in that daily dance between hot and cold, your senses are always a few steps ahead, guiding you with every breeze, every chill, and every cozy moment. Imagine waking up one morning and reaching for a glass of water with a hand that no longer exists. You feel your fingers close around the cool surface of the glass. You're certain your arm moved. But when you glance down, there's nothing there, just empty space. Welcome to the strange and fascinating world of phantom limb syndrome, where the brain's idea of your body doesn't quite match reality. Phantom limb syndrome is the name for the phenomenon in which amputees continue to feel sensations, sometimes even pain, in a limb that has been lost. It's surprisingly common. Estimates suggest that up to 90% of people who undergo limb amputation experience phantom sensations, and it's not just a fleeting illusion. These sensations can be detailed, vivid, and persistent. Some people feel an itch on a missing foot, others sense pressure in a hand that's no longer attached, and for many it's not just sensation, it's pain. Burning, tingling, cramping pain, radiating from a part of the body that's no longer there. To understand why this happens, we need to look at the brain's internal map of the body, what neuroscientists call the body schema. This map isn't etched in stone, it's flexible, constantly updated with sensory input from the body. But when a limb is removed, the map doesn't automatically erase it. The neurons responsible for that limb don't just go silent, they continue to fire, sometimes unpredictably, creating the illusion that the limb is still there. In a way, your brain is stubborn. It expects feedback from the missing limb, and when it doesn't get it, it fills in the blanks. It's a bit like a television with poor reception. It doesn't just go black. It produces static or strange patterns. Phantom limb sensations are the brain's version of static, only the static feels very real. But the brain doesn't just passively hallucinate these sensations, it can get quite creative. Some people report feeling their phantom limb move in space, or even change shape. There are cases where the phantom hand feels clenched tightly in a fist, causing intense discomfort. Others describe feeling their phantom foot twisted at an odd angle. These aren't random glitches. They're the result of a mismatch between the brain's motor commands and the lack of sensory feedback. When your brain tells your arm to move, it expects to feel movement in return, through proprioception, stretch, and pressure. But when the limb is gone, there's no feedback. The brain interprets this absence in strange ways, often resulting in the sensation of a frozen or stuck limb. It's a sensory illusion built on a broken loop. This mismatch is a broader phenomenon in neuroscience. The brain relies on constant communication between its internal model of the body and the signals it receives from the outside world. When those signals are missing or altered, the brain does what it always does. It makes its best guess. And sometimes, that guess is wrong in really fascinating ways. One of the most famous and innovative approaches to treating phantom limb pain is something called mirror therapy. It's deceptively simple. The person places their intact limb in front of a mirror so that it reflects where the missing limb would be. When they move their intact limb, the reflection gives the illusion that the missing limb is moving too. The brain sees the movement, believes the phantom is real, and, amazingly, often releases the tension or pain associated with it. This technique was pioneered by neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran in the 1990s. He discovered that, for many patients, Watching the reflection of their healthy hand could trick the brain into thinking the phantom hand was unclenching, stretching, or relaxing. The result was often immediate relief from years of persistent pain. It was a powerful demonstration of how visual feedback can alter the brain's internal map, and how flexible and trickable that map really is. The concept behind mirror therapy also reveals something fundamental about how we perceive our bodies. Our sense of self is a fusion of inputs: vision, touch, proprioception, and even expectation. When these inputs conflict, the brain chooses the most reliable, or most convincing source. In the case of a mirror, vision tends to win. It's the loudest and most persuasive sense, especially when it offers a neat solution to a confusing problem. But phantom sensations aren't limited to amputees. There are cases of phantom breasts following mastectomy, phantom eyes after enucleation, and even phantom organs like a missing appendix still hurting years after its removal. The brain, once it learns to represent a body part, is reluctant to let it go. And sometimes it creates body parts that were never there to begin with. In rare cases, people born without limbs have reported experiencing phantom sensations in those limbs. They have no prior sensory input from that body part, no memories of movement or touch. Yet they still feel as though the limb exists. This suggests that the body map in the brain isn't built entirely from experience. Some of it may be hardwired. On the flip side, there are conditions in which people feel that a healthy, functioning limb doesn't belong to them. This is known as body integrity identity disorder. Individuals with this condition may be convinced that a leg or arm is not their own, even though it works perfectly well. They may even seek amputation to resolve the conflict. It's a chilling and poignant example of what happens when the brain's body schema goes awry. Even in the general population, sensory illusions reveal how easily the brain can be fooled. One well-known experiment is the rubber hand illusion. In this setup, a person places their real hand out of sight while a rubber hand is placed in front of them. Both the real and rubber hands are stroked simultaneously. After a few moments, the brain begins to adopt the rubber hand as its own. People will flinch when the rubber hand is threatened, even though they know it's fake. It's not a magic trick. It's a demonstration of how vision and touch work together to shape the sense of ownership over a body part. This sense of ownership is not just an abstract idea. It's rooted in neural processes that link the body to the self. Your brain has to constantly ask, is this mine? And does this fit the map? When everything lines up, what you see, what you feel, what you expect, it feels right. When something's off, the brain tries to correct it. Sometimes those corrections are helpful. Other times they create illusions. Phantom limb syndrome, and all the related sensory quirks that come with it, remind us that the brain doesn't just receive information, it interprets it, guesses at it, and occasionally invents it. Sensation isn't a perfect mirror of reality. It's a narrative, built from fragments of input and shaped by memory, belief, and expectation. The fact that a person can feel a hand that no longer exists, or disown a hand that's perfectly healthy, tells us a lot about the flexibility of the human brain. It's a master of adaptation, but also a master of illusion. It fills in blanks, patches holes, and rewrites the script when necessary. Most of the time, this works beautifully. But when the system goes rogue, it opens a door to some of the strangest experiences a person can have. The phantom in the brain isn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It's a reflection of the brain's commitment to consistency. It wants your body to make sense, even when the evidence disagrees. And if that means inventing a hand, or rewriting a map, or clinging to a feeling that no longer has a source, it will. Because to the brain, coherence is everything, even if it means believing in a limb that's long gone. There's a moment during exercise, whether you're climbing stairs, jogging around the block, or heroically carrying all your grocery bags in one trip, when your brain chimes in and says, "That's enough." Not because your legs have stopped working or your heart has given up, but because you feel like you've reached a limit. That sensation, the internal gauge that measures how hard you're working, is part of a fascinating and often overlooked sense, the sense of effort. Unlike pain or temperature, effort doesn't always come with a sharp or dramatic signal. It's more of a whisper than a scream, but it's a whisper that governs everything from how you move to when you rest. This sense helps regulate your behaviour, prevents overexertion, and, perhaps most importantly, lets you make decisions about how to pace yourself. Effort is sometimes described as a blend of signals from the body and interpretations from the brain. It's both sensation and perception. On one hand, there's raw data, muscle stretching, oxygen level shifting, heart rate rising. On the other hand, there's your interpretation of those signals. This is getting hard. That interpretation is what influences your choices. For athletes, this sense of effort is a key part of performance. Whether someone is running a marathon or lifting weights at the gym, their brain is constantly assessing how sustainable the activity is. Push too hard, too fast, and the brain steps in with fatigue, forcing a slowdown. Pacing isn't just physical, it's mental. The body might technically be capable of more, but the sense of effort acts as a safety buffer, encouraging you to conserve energy, avoid injury, and maintain control. Interestingly, this buffer is not fixed. It changes based on experience, motivation, training, and even belief. Studies have shown that when athletes are given positive reinforcement, or when they believe they're capable of more, their perceived effort can decrease. Even when their output stays the same, the muscles are doing just as much work, but the brain is interpreting the experience differently. That means effort isn't just something that happens to you. It's something your brain partially constructs based on expectation and context. The technical term for this experience is the rating of perceived exertion, or RPE. It's used widely in sports science to help individuals monitor their own physical output. Instead of relying purely on heart rate or calories burned, RPE asks, how hard does this feel right now? It might sound subjective, but that's the whole point. Effort is about internal experience, not just external metrics. Even in everyday life, the sense of effort is always active. Walking up a hill feels harder than walking on flat ground, not just because of physics, but because your brain processes the increased demand and updates your awareness accordingly. You don't need someone to tell you it's more difficult. You just know. And that knowing comes from integrating muscle feedback, oxygen demand, balance adjustments, and a long history of comparing experiences. This sense isn't limited to physical movement either. Think about speech. Talking for hours, especially in a loud environment, can feel exhausting. Your vocal cords tire, your breathing pattern shifts, and your brain starts flagging the activity as effortful. Teachers, public speakers, and singers are often highly attuned to the effort involved in speaking or projecting their voice. It's not about pain. It's about the growing sense of muscular and neurological strain. Even concentration can carry a similar signature. Mental fatigue and physical fatigue share overlapping pathways in the brain. After long periods of intense thinking or problem solving, people often describe themselves as tired, even if they've been sitting still. That's because the brain, like any organ, uses energy. And when energy demand rises, your sense of effort kicks in, not just in the legs or arms, but in the mind itself. What's especially interesting is how the sense of effort works as a feedback loop. When you begin a task, your brain estimates how much energy it will take. As you continue, it updates that estimate based on real-time input. If you're well fed, rested, and motivated, the task may feel easier than expected. But if you're hungry, tired, or emotionally drained, even simple activities might feel heavier. The same hill might look steeper. The same load might feel heavier. Your sense of effort is not just physical, it's contextual. This loop is also closely tied to motivation. If a reward is perceived as worthwhile, the same task may feel less effortful. A runner in a race may experience less fatigue in the final stretch, simply because the finish line is in sight. Your brain recalibrates what is worth the effort in real time, adjusting how difficult the task feels based on how meaningful it is. This is partly why goal setting and mental framing are so powerful in athletic training and rehabilitation. When effort feels purposeful, it becomes more tolerable. In some cases, the sense of effort can misfire. People with chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, often report an intense sense of effort from even mild activities. Their muscles may not be damaged, and their hearts may be functioning well, but the internal perception of effort is greatly amplified. Similarly, in certain neurological or psychiatric conditions, effort may feel disproportionately high or low, regardless of actual exertion. These cases remind us that effort isn't an objective number, it's a subjective experience influenced by a wide web of systems. And then there's the placebo effect. Simply believing that a task will be easier can reduce perceived effort. In one study, cyclists who were told they were riding faster than usual actually produced more power, even though they didn't feel like they were working harder. The body performed better simply because the brain believed it could. The placebo didn't make the task easier, it changed how the effort was interpreted. All of this points to an elegant truth. Effort is not just about energy output. It's a sense shaped by biology, experience, memory, and meaning. It's the reason you stop sprinting at the right moment, pace yourself during a long hike, or decide that carrying all the grocery bags in one go isn't that smart after all. And it's also the reason you might push yourself a little farther when you feel proud, excited, or determined. Effort is an internal compass, keeping your actions within the bounds of what your body and brain agree is sustainable. And like most internal compasses, it can be trained, recalibrated, or, on occasion, gently ignored, especially when you need to rise to a challenge. If you've ever told yourself just 5 more minutes during a workout, or 1 more page while studying, you've negotiated with your sense of effort. Sometimes you listen, sometimes you push through, but that negotiation, that quiet internal dialogue is always happening. So the next time you feel your legs getting heavy during a run, or your shoulders sinking at the end of a long day, remember that what you're feeling isn't just tired muscles or mental fog. It's your nervous system checking in, reporting back, helping you decide when to press on and when to rest. It's the body's way of saying, "We've done enough for now," or "We could go a little further." And while it may not be the most glamorous of the senses, the sense of effort is one of the most human. It connects the physical and the psychological, the immediate and the long term. It's the whisper that keeps you moving one step at a time through everything you do. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing perfectly still. You lift your arm in front of you, gently wave your hand, then lower it again. Simple, right? You didn't need to look, you didn't need to guess, and you didn't need to plan every second of the movement. Your body just knew what to do, but now imagine performing that same task without any internal sense of where your limbs are. No feedback from your muscles, no subtle tug from tendons, no information coming in from your joints or skin, just empty space and a body you can't feel. This is the reality faced by people who lose their proprioceptive sense, the hidden, internal GPS that tells you where your body is in space. When that system goes offline, the body becomes unfamiliar territory. Moving through the world begins to feel like floating in the dark with no map, no guide rope, and no reliable way to know what's happening below your neck. One of the most remarkable examples of this comes from the story of Ian Waterman, a British man whose experience has captivated neuroscientists, doctors, and philosophers alike. In his early 20s, Ian contracted a rare viral infection that attacked his nervous system. More specifically, it damaged the sensory nerves responsible for proprioception and touch, those critical signals that tell the brain where the body is and what it's doing. Curiously, his motor nerves remained intact, meaning he still had strength in his muscles, but without any sensory feedback, he had no idea where his limbs were unless he looked at them. When Ian first awoke after the illness, he felt as though he was paralyzed. He couldn't sit up, couldn't control his arms or legs, not because they were weak, but because he had lost the sense of ownership over them. He described the sensation as if his body had disappeared. His limbs were there, technically, but they might as well have belonged to someone else. It was as though the lights had gone out in a room he used to know very well. Most of us operate with a seamless feedback loop between intention and movement. You think about walking, your body takes over, and you go. Ian's brain could still send commands to move, but it received no confirmation that the movement had happened. It was like trying to drive a car with the windows blacked out and no dashboard. You might press the gas, but you wouldn't know whether you were moving forward, backward, or straight into a wall. To function again, Ian had to rebuild his entire approach to movement. He began learning to control his body entirely through vision. If he could see a limb, he could guide it. If he looked away, all bets were off. Walking required constant visual monitoring of his legs and feet. If the lights were turned off, he would immediately fall. Everyday actions, like picking up a cup or scratching an itch, had to be studied, mapped out, and visually executed like choreography. His journey to regain independence was painstaking. He spent months learning how to sit, stand, and walk again, all using vision as a substitute for proprioception. What for most people is automatic, reaching for a glass, opening a door, climbing stairs, became a series of conscious, deliberate acts. His movements were stiff and mechanical at first, and only with time and practice did they regain some natural fluidity. And yet, against all odds, Ian succeeded. With relentless determination and an almost superhuman capacity for adaptation, he relearned how to live independently. He eventually walked, worked, and even danced again, albeit with a level of concentration most of us reserve for brain surgery. He became, in a very literal sense, a self-made man. Someone who rebuilt his sense of movement from scratch, using only sight and willpower. His case has provided researchers with extraordinary insights into how the brain handles body awareness. It shows just how deeply we rely on sensory feedback to move through the world, and how fragile that system can be when disrupted. It also highlights the brain's ability to rewire and adapt, even in the face of massive sensory loss. Ian's condition is known clinically as large fibre sensory neuropathy. The large fibres in question are those that carry signals related to proprioception and touch. When these fibres are damaged or destroyed, whether by infection, trauma, or disease, the brain loses access to one of its most important feedback systems. Other conditions, such as multiple sclerosis or certain spinal cord injuries, can produce similar effects depending on which pathways are involved. When proprioception is compromised, balance often suffers too. That's because your vestibular system, which helps you detect head movement and orientation, works in tandem with proprioceptive input to keep you upright. Take away the sense of where your feet are, and standing becomes a wobbly, uncertain task. People with severe proprioceptive deficits often walk with a wide stance, keep their eyes fixed on their limbs, and struggle with coordination. Tasks that require fine motor control, like buttoning a shirt or writing, can feel nearly impossible without visual guidance. This is why people with such conditions often describe their experience as floating or disconnected. The body feels distant, unfamiliar, and sometimes even alien. Movement becomes abstract. You know intellectually that your arm is attached to your shoulder, but without sensation, it feels more like a puppet you're trying to control with your eyes and imagination. And yet, as Ian's story proves, the brain is astonishingly adaptable. In time, his visual system took over many of the roles once handled by proprioception. He developed a highly refined awareness of his limbs based on sight alone, even learning to anticipate and predict how movements should feel, based purely on practice and muscle memory. This kind of compensation is rare but powerful, and it underscores how flexible the human nervous system really is. For those without such impairments, it's easy to forget how miraculous proprioception truly is. Every step you take involves hundreds of micro-adjustments based on stretch, tension, and position. You're constantly shifting weight, correcting your center of gravity, and aligning joints without needing to think about any of it. It's the background music of movement, always playing, but rarely noticed. When that music stops, the silence is deafening. Movements that once felt natural become conscious calculations. Imagine trying to take a step without knowing where your foot is, or reaching for something without feeling your arm move. Now imagine doing that for the rest of your life. The effort, the concentration, the sheer mental load is enormous. And yet many people with proprioceptive disorders find ways to adapt. They use tools, routines, and external cues to manage daily life. They rely on vision, touch, or even sound to substitute for lost feedback. Some use mobility aids to reduce the cognitive burden of movement. Others find creative workarounds like arranging furniture in predictable patterns, or using auditory signals to help with coordination. These adaptations speak not just to the complexity of the nervous system, but to the resilience of the human spirit. When one pathway fails, others step in. When a sense disappears, the brain doesn't give up, it gets inventive. In a world filled with high-tech gadgets and smart devices, it's easy to overlook the most brilliant interface of all, your own body. The way you move through space, without effort or thought, is the result of a beautifully choreographed dance between the brain, the senses, and the muscles. And when one part of that dance falters, it reminds us just how much we rely on things we rarely notice. Ian Waterman's story is extraordinary, but it also holds a quiet lesson for the rest of us. That the simple act of walking across a room, reaching for a pen, or pouring a glass of water is not simple at all. It's a miracle of coordination, timing, and feedback. It's a performance your brain pulls off every day, invisibly, flawlessly, until the lights go out. And even then, if the story of Ian is any guide, the human brain will still try to find its way through the dark. There's something oddly comforting about knowing exactly where you end and the rest of the world begins. Your arms are your arms, your face is your face, and when you wave at your reflection in a mirror, you feel completely certain that the moving image is you. This effortless sense of self, of being located somewhere inside your body, is something most of us take for granted. And yet, this feeling is not as solid as it seems. In fact, it's surprisingly easy to trick. One of the most famous demonstrations of how fragile body ownership can be is the rubber hand illusion. In this experiment, a person sits with one hand hidden from view and a realistic-looking rubber hand placed in front of them. Both the real and fake hands are stroked simultaneously with a paintbrush in the same rhythm and direction. Within about a minute, something strange happens. The brain starts to adopt the rubber hand as its own. People begin to feel as though the fake hand is part of their body. Some even flinch if the rubber hand is threatened, despite knowing full well it's not actually theirs. This illusion works because the brain is always trying to reconcile sensory information. It takes cues from vision, touch, and proprioception, your sense of body position, and uses them to build a coherent sense of what belongs to you. When visual input and tactile input align closely enough, the brain concludes, well, if I see the hand being touched and feel the touch at the same time, that must be my hand. Logic is easily overridden by synchronized brushing. This simple experiment opens the door to a strange world of body transfer illusions. In more advanced setups, researchers have used virtual reality to make people feel as though they inhabit entirely different bodies, of different ages, races, or even species. In one study, participants wearing a VR headset could see through the eyes of a mannequin. After a few minutes of synchronized movement, they began to feel as though the mannequin's body was their own. Some reported disorientation when the mannequin was touched or harmed, as if their own body were at risk. These illusions reveal just how malleable the sense of body ownership really is. What we think of as our physical self is not just a static fact, it's a constantly updated mental model built from sensory input. Your brain is constantly polling your eyes, your skin, your joints, and your internal organs to confirm in real time that you are where you think you are. And when that data changes or becomes ambiguous, your sense of self can shift with it. At the heart of this process are two major sensory systems, proprioception and interoception. Proprioception provides the map of your body in space, where your limbs are, how they're moving, and what they're doing. Interoception supplies the internal status report, how fast your heart is beating, whether you're breathing deeply, if your stomach is full or your muscles are tense. Together, they create the feeling of being in a body and owning that body as your own. Imagine trying to feel like you, without knowing where your hands are or how your lungs are moving. It would be disorienting at best, terrifying at worst. That's because these senses form the scaffolding of self-awareness. Without them, the boundary between me and not me begins to blur, and that line, as it turns out, is surprisingly easy to bend. In some clinical conditions, this sense of embodiment is disrupted entirely. People with depersonalization disorder, for example, often describe feeling detached from their bodies, as if they're observing themselves from the outside. Their limbs may feel unfamiliar. Their face in the mirror might seem distant or unreal. It's not that they don't know intellectually who they are, but that their felt experience of self has come unmoored. Other conditions, such as schizophrenia, can involve a breakdown in the boundaries of body ownership. Some individuals may feel that their movements are being controlled by an outside force, or that their thoughts are not their own. In rare cases, people experience a phenomenon called somatoparaphrenia, in which they deny ownership of a limb entirely. "That's not my arm," they might say of their perfectly healthy limb, and they truly believe it. These aren't metaphors. They're the result of real, measurable changes in brain function. Neuroimaging studies have shown that areas like the temporoparietal junction and the insular cortex play key roles in integrating sensory information into a cohesive body image. When those areas are disrupted, the boundaries of the self can dissolve, shift, or fragment. Even outside of clinical settings, we all experience temporary shifts in body awareness. Think about the way your leg feels after it falls asleep. It's still your leg, but it no longer feels like it's part of you. Or the disorienting sensation of watching a video of yourself and thinking, "Do I really sound like that?" Your brain's self-model is always being updated, always testing new data against old expectations. Proprioception also plays a role in how we distinguish ourselves from others. Studies have shown that when people watch another person move in perfect sync with them, their sense of distinction between self and other can become blurred. In dance, martial arts, or synchronized activities, this merging can even feel euphoric. You momentarily dissolve into the rhythm, the group, the flow. And then there are those rare moments where your body surprises you, like catching a ball without thinking or stumbling and recovering in a single smooth motion. These moments remind us that the self is not always located in conscious thought. Sometimes it's in the automatic, the unplanned, the reflexive. Your body knows itself so well that it can act on your behalf before your brain has time to formulate a plan. You move, and only afterward do you realize how seamless that motion was. The feeling of being embodied, of being you, is not a single experience. It's a woven fabric of many threads. Movement, touch, internal rhythm, external cues, and a persistent behind-the-scenes belief that this body belongs to you. Most of the time, that fabric holds together beautifully, but when it frays, even slightly, it reveals how delicately the self is stitched together. In philosophy and neuroscience alike, there's growing curiosity about what exactly the self is. Is it the body, the mind, the relationship between the two? The emerging consensus is that the self is not a thing, but a process, a dynamic construction that emerges from countless sensory signals, integrated into a model that feels stable, even though it's always changing. Every time you catch a glimpse of your reflection, feel the breeze on your skin, or sense your heartbeat in your chest, you're reinforcing that model. You're confirming your presence in the world. You are quite literally sensing yourself into existence. And while your brain may be capable of being tricked by illusions or experiments, it's also remarkably good at recovering. Step away from the rubber hand, remove the headset, stand up, walk around, and within moments, the boundaries of your body reassert themselves. The world snaps back into place. The you that felt like it wandered off quietly returns to where it belongs, That's the beautiful tension at the heart of body ownership. It is both deeply stable and astonishingly fragile. It can be shaken by a simple experiment or rebuilt after a neurological storm. It can vanish in illness and reappear in recovery. And through it all, it keeps you grounded, giving you a sense of presence, of location, of being here, now, in this body. No other sense brings you home to yourself quite like the feeling of being you. And even when the lines blur, when the map becomes fuzzy or the signals contradict, the brain never stops trying to make sense of it all, because at its core, the experience of being embodied is not just about where your body is, it's about where you are. You know the feeling, one moment you're going about your day and the next something just feels off. You're shivering even though the room is warm. Your skin tingles, your limbs ache, and your favourite blanket suddenly becomes your best friend. Then comes the creeping suspicion, do I have a fever? What's remarkable is that long before you pull out a thermometer or make a dramatic announcement about needing tea and sympathy, your body has already figured it out. Quietly, efficiently, and without asking your opinion, your nervous system has picked up on tiny internal changes and adjusted its status report accordingly. This is interoception in action, your hidden sense of the internal world. And when it comes to temperature regulation, it's a highly skilled and always on duty operator. At the heart of this operation is a tiny but powerful region in your brain called the hypothalamus. Tucked deep inside the brain near the base, the hypothalamus is like mission control for homeostasis, the delicate balancing act that keeps your internal environment stable. From fluid balance to appetite, hormone levels to sleep rhythms, the hypothalamus is the unsung conductor of the body's physiological symphony. And one of its key roles is managing your core temperature. For most people, the body hums along around 37 degrees Celsius. That's not a static number. It fluctuates slightly throughout the day, rising in the late afternoon and dipping during the early hours of the morning. But overall, the body is remarkably good at keeping that temperature within a tight, comfortable range. It does this through an elegant system of thermoregulation that relies on continuous feedback from temperature-sensitive receptors located throughout your body, including your skin, spinal cord, and even your gut. These thermal sensors report back to the hypothalamus, which then coordinates responses to keep everything in equilibrium. If you're too hot, the hypothalamus sends out instructions to dilate blood vessels near the skin, increase sweat production, and reduce physical activity. If you're too cold, it tightens up blood vessels, triggers shivering, and may even make you feel a little sleepy to encourage rest and conservation of energy. But when your immune system detects an infection or inflammation, it sends chemical messengers called pyrogens to the brain. These pyrogens signal the hypothalamus to raise the body's temperature set point. It's a bit like adjusting the thermostat in your house from 22 degrees to 25. Suddenly, even though your actual body temperature hasn't changed yet, your brain thinks you're too cold. This is when the chills start. You wrap yourself in blankets, turn up the heat, and your muscles begin to shiver, all because your body is working hard to meet the new, artificially raised set point. You're not cold in the traditional sense, you're just being told to act like you are so your temperature can climb to meet the new target. From the inside, it feels confusing. Why am I cold if I have a fever? But biologically, it's a brilliant adaptation. Fever is the body's way of creating an environment that's less friendly to bacteria and viruses. Many pathogens don't function well at elevated temperatures, so your body heats things up to give itself an edge. Once your temperature catches up to the new set point, the shivering stops. You settle into that strange, flushed warmth of a full fever, where the skin feels hot to the touch, but the insides still feel oddly delicate. During this time, the hypothalamus is monitoring everything carefully, constantly deciding whether to increase or decrease the internal temperature based on feedback from thermal receptors. These receptors aren't just sitting around waiting for emergencies. They're always working, even when you're feeling perfectly fine. They notice when your hands are too warm under the covers, or when a cool breeze hits your neck. But they also report on deeper, more subtle shifts. For instance, When you exercise, your muscles generate heat. Your core temperature rises, and the hypothalamus initiates sweat and increased blood flow to the skin to cool you down. You may not consciously notice all of this happening, but your interoceptive system does. And when something goes wrong, when infection or inflammation triggers a change in that thermostat, the brain responds in kind. You might feel fatigue, muscle aches, and malaise. These aren't just symptoms of being sick, they're part of a coordinated bodily strategy to conserve energy, rest, and allow your immune system to work. Your interoceptive awareness, your internal sense of being unwell, is part of the reason you decide to lie down, skip the errands, or drink hot tea in your pajamas instead of marching on with your day. Of course, fevers aren't just warm and cozy. Once your body has fought off the invading microbes, it resets the thermostat. Your hypothalamus lowers the set point back to normal, and suddenly, the internal environment feels too hot. That's when you start sweating. The body opens the floodgates, literally, to shed the excess heat. Blood vessels dilate, skin flushes, and your blanket suddenly feels like a sauna tent. You're not sick anymore. You're cooling down. And again, all of this is orchestrated behind the scenes by interoceptive processes and the quiet genius of the hypothalamus. Interestingly, some people are more sensitive to these internal changes than others. Highly interoceptive individuals may detect the onset of a fever before a thermometer confirms it. They might sense subtle changes in their heartbeat, skin warmth, or fatigue levels. Others may only notice once the chills or aches arrive. Just like other senses, interoception exists on a spectrum, and its clarity can vary based on attention, experience, or health status. In certain conditions, this sensitivity can become distorted. People with anxiety, for example, may misinterpret normal temperature fluctuations as signs of illness. A slightly warm forehead can trigger concern. A flush of heat can feel like a symptom rather than a harmless variation. It's a reminder that the interpretation of internal signals matters as much as the signals themselves. The brain isn't just reading the data, it's assigning meaning to it. Children are often less skilled at interpreting these cues, which is why they can suddenly spike high fevers without much warning or complaint. Their interoceptive systems are still developing, and their immune responses tend to be more reactive. On the other end of the spectrum, older adults may have blunted fever responses, making it harder to detect infections. The sense of internal temperature is finely tuned, but like all sensory systems, it changes over time. And while we often rely on thermometers to confirm a fever, the subjective experience of temperature shift remains deeply meaningful. That moment of wrapping yourself in a blanket, noticing the shiver, or realizing that something's not quite right. Those are real sensory experiences. They're messages from the body to the brain saying, we're adjusting things inside. Pay attention. Even animals exhibit signs of interoceptive temperature awareness. Birds fluff their feathers. Dogs seek shade or curl into tight balls to conserve heat. These instinctive behaviors are rooted in the same biological principles that govern your own chills and sweats. Temperature isn't just something we feel on the skin. It's a deep, internal rhythm that ties us to every living creature with a nervous system. At the end of the day, a fever might feel like an inconvenience, a reason to cancel plans, eat soup, and binge old movies. But it's also an elegant ancient defense mechanism. It's your body turning up the heat to fight back, all while letting your brain know what's going on through a subtle blend of chills, flushes, and fatigue. You don't need to understand every signal. Your body is already speaking the language fluently. All you have to do is listen. There's a reason we say things like gut feeling or butterflies in the stomach, or my stomach's in knots. These aren't just poetic flourishes or emotional metaphors. They're echoes of something very real happening inside you. Your gut, it turns out, has opinions, and sometimes it's not afraid to share them. Tucked inside the winding walls of your intestines is a vast network of neurons, over 100 million of them, known as the enteric nervous system. That's more neurons than you'll find in the spinal cord. This hidden command center is so complex, so autonomous, and so eerily capable of independent decision-making that scientists often call it your second brain. But don't worry, it's not plotting a digestive coup. The enteric nervous system is busy enough just running the elaborate show of digestion, nutrient absorption, immune responses, and microbial management. What makes the gut truly fascinating, though, is how deeply it communicates with your actual brain. This isn't just a one-way message about whether you're full or hungry. It's a constant, intricate feedback loop running through a superhighway of nerves, chemicals, and hormonal signals. And at the heart of this communication is the vagus nerve, a long, wandering bundle of fibers that connects the brainstem to major organs, including the heart, lungs, and of course, the gut. The vagus nerve is like the friendly neighborhood mail carrier of your body's internal world. It picks up signals from your intestines about things like stretch, fullness, inflammation, or even microbial activity, and delivers them straight to the brain. Meanwhile, your brain sends down its own memos, adjusting gut motility, acid production, or enzyme secretion based on context. This brain-gut dialogue is always happening, whether you're aware of it or not. But sometimes you are aware of it. You feel anxious, and suddenly your stomach churns. You're about to speak in public, and your intestines feel like they're reenacting a scene from a suspense thriller. You hear bad news, and your appetite vanishes without explanation. These reactions aren't accidents. They're the visible ripples of deep neural pathways lighting up. Anxiety in particular has a starring role in this drama. When you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, preparing you for a fight-or-flight response. That means less energy goes to non-essential systems like digestion, while blood is diverted to your muscles and heart. The gut slows down, contracts unpredictably, or becomes hypersensitive. This can result in nausea, cramps, urgency, or that strange fluttering we call butterflies. The emotional storm brewing in your brain doesn't stay confined to the skull. It echoes downward, altering the landscape of your gut in real time. The reverse is true too. Gut signals can shape how you feel emotionally. The bacteria living in your intestines, the gut microbiome, aren't just along for the ride. They help break down food, produce vitamins, and even manufacture neurotransmitters like serotonin. In fact, around 90% of your body's serotonin is produced in the gut. That's the same molecule that helps regulate mood, appetite, and sleep. When the microbial balance in your intestines shifts, it can affect how much serotonin is made, how it's processed, and how your nervous system responds. Emerging research suggests that disruptions to the gut microbiome might contribute to mood disorders like depression and anxiety. It's not just about what you eat, it's about what those foods feed and how those tiny organisms in turn influence your neurochemistry. This isn't to say your gut bacteria are calling the emotional shots, but they are active participants in a much larger conversation about how you feel. Hunger, too, is more complex than we often give it credit for. It's not just a rumbling stomach or an empty feeling. It's an orchestra of signals involving blood sugar levels, hormone levels, mechanical stretch of the stomach wall, and feedback from the intestines. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin travel through the bloodstream and inform your brain whether to seek food or stop eating. But your gut also provides its own commentary. It evaluates not just how much food you've eaten, but what kind. High-fiber foods trigger stretch receptors more quickly. Sugars and fats can activate reward pathways. Sometimes your body says, "I'm full," but your brain still says, "I could go for a cookie." And then there's that other kind of hunger, the one that lives more in the mind than in the belly. Emotional eating, comfort food cravings, or appetite loss during sadness all reflect the delicate interplay between brain and gut. If you've ever felt your appetite disappear during heartbreak or increase during boredom, that's the brain-gut axis doing its thing. It's not just about fuel, it's about feelings. Even immune responses in the gut can affect your emotional state. When the lining of the intestines becomes inflamed due to infection, food intolerance, or chronic conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, chemical messengers called cytokines are released. These can influence mood and fatigue through systemic effects, further reinforcing the connection between what happens in your belly and what happens in your head. But perhaps what's most fascinating is that the enteric nervous system can operate independently of the central nervous system. It doesn't need the brain's permission to do its job. It can control digestion, absorption, and local blood flow on its own. If your brain were temporarily unplugged, let's say for the purposes of some wildly improbable sci-fi scenario, your gut would still continue digesting lunch like nothing happened. Of course, your brain doesn't usually leave the scene, and when the two systems are in sync, life feels smoother. You eat, digest, and move through your day with a sense of physical and emotional balance. But when that rhythm falters, due to stress, illness, or poor diet, the effects ripple in both directions. You might feel bloated and anxious, or restless and nauseated, or simply out of tune with yourself. This is where practices like mindful eating, breathwork, or even gut-focused therapies come into play. By calming the nervous system, often through the vagus nerve, you can influence digestion, reduce inflammation, and improve your emotional well-being. It's not magic, it's physiology. And while the science is still catching up to the full complexity of these systems, the early findings are both exciting and affirming. Your gut may not compose symphonies or write sonnets, but it does have its own kind of wisdom. It processes more than just food. It processes the world around you. It notices what you eat, how fast you eat it, and how you feel while doing so. It talks to your brain in whispers and waves, sometimes soothing, sometimes urgent, and it has a stake in your happiness, your decisions, and your sense of being well. So the next time your stomach flutters, twists, or grumbles in response to something you can't quite explain, know this: it might not be indigestion. It could be your second brain chiming in with a thought of its own, not in words, but in sensations, not in logic, but in instinct. And sometimes those gut feelings are worth listening to. Imagine waking up in a hospital bed after a stroke, unable to move your left arm, but instead of panic or confusion, you feel nothing unusual. In fact, you casually wave away the nurse's concerns and insist that your arm is just fine. Maybe it's a little tired, maybe it's under the blanket, but paralyzed? Absolutely not. You might even try to stand up, only to topple over, bewildered at how uncooperative your body seems to be. Welcome to the strange and baffling world of anosognosia. Anosognosia is a neurological condition in which a person is unaware of their own disability. It's not denial in the everyday, emotional sense. It's not stubbornness or avoidance. It's a genuine inability to recognize that something fundamental has changed. A person with anosognosia can be completely paralyzed on one side of their body and still sincerely believe they can move just fine. No matter how much evidence is presented or how many falls they take, they may continue to insist everything is perfectly normal. This condition most often appears after a stroke, especially when the stroke affects the right hemisphere of the brain. The right side is heavily involved in constructing our internal model of the body, particularly the left side of the body. When that region is damaged, the brain can no longer properly register or update its awareness of what the body is doing. The result is a kind of sensory and cognitive blind spot, a disconnection between perception and reality. It's a difficult thing to wrap the mind around. How could someone not know that they can't move their arm? But anosognosia isn't a failure of intelligence or attention. It's a breakdown in the feedback loop between sensation, motor control, and self-awareness. The body sends out a message, "Hey, I'm not moving," but the brain never receives or processes it. In the absence of contradictory data, the brain fills in the blanks with the assumption that everything is functioning as expected. There's something both eerie and fascinating about this. Anosognosia peels back the curtain on how much of our self-awareness depends on invisible, automatic processes. We don't usually check in with our limbs to confirm they're working. We just assume they are. and that assumption is usually correct. But when the neurological wiring is disrupted, the illusion of control can persist long after actual control is lost. Patients with anosognosia often come up with creative explanations for their symptoms. If asked why they aren't moving their left leg, they might say it's resting. If asked to clap their hands, they may bring the right hand over and pat the left, interpreting the movement as a successful attempt. These aren't lies or deliberate fabrications. They're the brain's honest efforts to maintain coherence in a world where the normal rules no longer apply. In one documented case, a woman with complete paralysis on her left side was asked to raise her left arm. She confidently said she had done so. When shown that the arm had not moved, she became briefly puzzled, then suggested perhaps someone had moved it without her noticing. Her certainty in her own movement was not shaken. It simply shifted to accommodate the new information. The brain, it seems, values a coherent narrative even more than an accurate one. This is what makes anosognosia so powerful from a scientific perspective. It offers a window into the construction of consciousness, the way the brain assembles a working version of reality using limited and sometimes faulty information. The brain isn't just a passive receiver of sensory data, it's an active builder, constantly predicting, interpreting and updating a model of the body and the world. And when that model becomes damaged or incomplete, it can lead to deeply strange experiences. In some cases, anosognosia is accompanied by another curious condition called somatoparaphrenia. In this condition, patients may not only deny that a limb is theirs, they may insist that it belongs to someone else. "That's not my arm," one patient said. "It belongs to the doctor. He left it here." Others have claimed the arm belongs to a sister, a roommate, or even a mannequin. Again, this isn't delusion in the psychiatric sense. It's a genuine failure of body ownership, a sensory and cognitive glitch in the map of self. These phenomena highlight the delicate dance between the physical body and the sense of identity. We assume that because our body is always with us, our awareness of it is automatic and complete. But anosognosia proves that awareness is a construction, one that can break down under the right or wrong circumstances. Not all anosognosia involves physical paralysis. In some neurological and psychiatric conditions, individuals may lose awareness of cognitive deficits, memory loss, or emotional changes. People with dementia may forget that they've forgotten something. Individuals with schizophrenia may be unaware of hallucinations or delusional thinking. In bipolar disorder, people in manic states may not realize that their behavior is risky or uncharacteristic. Across these cases, the core issue is the same. The self-monitoring system of the brain is compromised. This doesn't make these individuals less intelligent or less capable. In many cases, they remain articulate, insightful, and deeply reflective. But the system that flags when something is off has gone quiet. The internal alarm bell no longer rings, and so the mind proceeds as though everything is in working order. That said, anosognosia can sometimes fade over time, especially with therapy, feedback, and neuroplastic recovery. Some patients begin to acknowledge their impairments after repeated experiences or guided reflection. Others never regain awareness. It's still a mystery why anosognosia resolves in some individuals and not others. What's clear, though, is that recovery isn't just about physical function. It's also about regaining the ability to know what has changed. There's a delicate philosophical undertone to all of this. How much of who we are depends on the brain's ability to monitor itself. If your arm is paralyzed but you don't know it, does it still shape your sense of self? If a part of your body no longer registers in your internal map, is it still truly yours in the experiential sense? And perhaps most curiously, if we can be unaware of such a major loss, what else might we be blind to even now? Anosognosia forces us to confront the edges of consciousness, the grey zones where sensation and selfhood begin to unravel. It reminds us that awareness is not guaranteed, and that the I, who watches, moves, and thinks, is perched atop a vast and complex machinery. Most of the time, that machinery runs flawlessly, but every now and then, it stumbles, and when it does, we catch a rare glimpse into the scaffolding that holds the self together. In its own unsettling way, Anosognosia teaches us something valuable. It shows that the mind is not a single, unified entity, but a collection of systems working together in harmony, or at least in agreement. When one of those systems falls silent, the illusion of completeness can continue, like a play carrying on without one of the actors. The story persists. The audience may not notice the absence until the script veers off course. So much of being human is about believing in the reality of ourselves, believing that we know our bodies, our thoughts, our actions. Anosognosia doesn't just challenge that belief, it gently, eerily reveals how much of it is constructed, and how astonishing it is that most of the time it works at all. It's easy to imagine your senses working like a set of separate tools, vision doing its job, touch doing its own, and balance quietly keeping you upright from behind the scenes. But in reality, your senses are more like dancers in a well-rehearsed troupe. Individually graceful, yes, but truly spectacular only when they move together. This interplay is called multi-sensory integration, and it's what makes your perception of the world feel smooth, seamless, and beautifully real. Take something as simple as standing still. It doesn't seem like a team effort, but it's surprisingly collaborative. Your eyes provide visual confirmation that the room isn't spinning. Your inner ears, through the vestibular system, monitor head tilt and motion. Meanwhile, your feet relay pressure information through touch receptors, telling your brain whether you're on a hard floor, a soft carpet, or slightly off balance. Your muscles and joints chime in too through proprioception, updating the brain on subtle shifts in posture. These inputs arrive from different sources at slightly different times, and yet your brain stitches them together into a unified experience. It filters out background noise, balances contradictory signals, and makes judgment calls in milliseconds. You're not consciously aware of this coordination. It's happening far below the surface. You just feel like you're standing there, not falling over, and not particularly thinking about how miraculous that is. The elegance of this process becomes more apparent when something goes wrong. If you've ever stood up too quickly in the dark and suddenly felt dizzy, that's your brain working without all its usual tools. With vision taken out of the picture, your reliance on balance and body position becomes much greater. If your vestibular system is also feeling sluggish, perhaps from dehydration, lack of sleep, or an inner ear issue, you might sway, stumble, or feel disoriented. The world hasn't changed, but the sensory dance has lost its rhythm. Or consider walking through a room full of mirrors. Your visual sense might become confused by reflections and false depth cues. If your brain trusted vision alone, you'd probably walk straight into a pane of glass. But because your body can cross-reference with proprioception and touch, how your legs are moving, where your feet land, you adjust. You hesitate. You scan the floor. You test with a toe. Your brain is checking with the whole team before making a move. The interplay between senses is even more important in more complex activities. When you reach for a cup of tea, for example, you're using vision to locate it, proprioception to aim your arm, and tactile feedback from your fingertips to adjust your grip. If the cup is hotter than expected, temperature sensors trigger a quick reflex. If it's heavier than anticipated, muscle spindles inform your grip to tighten. All of this happens in a blink, and usually without conscious thought. What's especially remarkable is how adaptable the brain is when one of the senses is lost or altered. In cases of sensory substitution, other senses often step up to fill the gap. People who are blind often have heightened sensitivity in touch and hearing. Their brains don't just try harder with the remaining senses, they actually rewire themselves to process new types of information in creative ways. For example, studies have shown that when blind individuals read Braille, the part of the brain typically devoted to visual processing, the visual cortex, can light up. That means the brain is repurposing unused territory to process tactile input. The mind doesn't just sit idle when one sense is offline. It looks around, grabs whatever tools it has left, and gets back to work. This adaptability has inspired a fascinating area of research in sensory prosthetics and wearable technology. devices have been developed that allow people to hear colours through sound vibrations, or see obstacles by translating them into patterns of touch on the skin. These aren't science fiction gadgets. They're real tools that help the brain receive and interpret sensory information in entirely new ways. What's amazing is that users of these devices often report that, over time, the sensation begins to feel natural. At first, the vibrations or signals are confusing, but after repeated use, the brain starts to incorporate them into the internal body map, almost as if a new sense has been added. It's not quite sight or touch or hearing, but something in between. A new dance move added to the repertoire. Multisensory integration also plays a vital role in how we interpret social cues, emotions, and even language. The famous McGurk effect is a great example. If you watch a video of someone saying belle while the audio says guillet, your brain may fuse the two into dare. You're not mishearing in the traditional sense. Your brain is combining visual and auditory data to create a single interpretation. It's choosing the version of reality that feels most consistent across all inputs, even if it's technically inaccurate. This sensory collaboration can also be seen in the phenomenon of synesthesia, where stimulation of one sense involuntarily triggers another. Some people see colours when they hear music, or associate specific tastes with words. While not typical, synesthesia reveals just how interconnected the brain's sensory pathways really are. In most of us, those connections are subtle. In synesthetes, they shine like a disco ball. Even the simple act of enjoying a meal is a multisensory symphony. Taste, smell, texture, temperature, sound, and visual presentation all come together to shape your experience. That crunchy chip, the aromatic swirl of cinnamon, the warm weight of a spoonful of soup. None of these impressions live in isolation. They blur together into the moment, creating a fuller, richer sense of what you're eating. And if you've ever had a cold and noticed food tasting bland, you've felt what it's like when one dancer leaves the floor. There's something humbling in all this. We often think of ourselves as single observers, experiencing the world through a tidy set of separate channels. But our actual experience is more like a hologram, a seamless blend of inputs, stitched together by a brain that's constantly negotiating, balancing, and translating. The real wonder isn't in each sense by itself, but in the orchestra they form together. And what's more, that orchestra is flexible. It learns, it improvises. If one instrument falls silent, the others don't just stop playing, they rearrange the melody. That's not just sensory processing, that's resilience. That's the human brain showing off what it does best. Adapting to complexity, integrating the scattered pieces of the world into something whole, something navigable, something that feels like home. It's a quiet miracle, really. The way you walk, talk, reach, balance, taste and turn, all without thinking about how it's happening. The way your senses pass the baton from one to the next. The way your brain holds the choreography together. It's not just a dance, it's the dance of being alive. Imagine a tiny person living inside your brain. Not a metaphorical voice or cartoon conscience, but a literal lumpy little figure stretched and squashed in all the wrong places. Enormous hands, huge lips, comically small torso. This strange creature is known as the somatosensory homunculus, and while he might not win any beauty contests, he's one of the most revealing representations of how your brain perceives your body. The homunculus is not a real anatomical structure, of course. He's a map, a visualization of how much space different body parts occupy in the brain's somatosensory cortex. This region, located just behind the central sulcus in the parietal lobe, processes tactile information from the body. But the way this information is organized is anything but proportional. In the brain, not all body parts are created equal. Areas like your hands, lips, face, and tongue are granted a vast expanse of cortical territory, while larger but less sensitive regions, like your back, thighs, or torso, get far less space. That's why the homunculus has such bizarre proportions. He reflects the sensitivity of each area, not the size. Why do the hands and lips get so much attention? because they're packed with nerve endings and are responsible for incredibly fine-tuned tasks. Your fingertips can feel the texture of a grain of sand, detect the faint vibration of a buzzing phone, or manipulate a thread through a needle. Your lips and tongue help you speak, taste, kiss, and eat. These are high-priority zones for your brain's sensory input, so evolution allocated them more neural resources. The homunculus isn't just about touch. There's also a motor version, a distorted figure representing how much brain space is devoted to controlling different muscles. Unsurprisingly, the hands and mouth dominate that one too. Together, these maps show just how much of your mental real estate is spent dealing with the world through touch and movement. Now here's where things get even more interesting. The homunculus is not fixed. It's not carved in stone. It's plastic, not in the Tupperware sense, but in the neurological sense. Your brain can reshape and reorganize these maps over time through a process known as neuroplasticity. Say you lose a finger. The part of the brain that used to receive input from that finger doesn't go dark. Instead, neighboring regions, perhaps linked to the adjacent fingers, start to expand into the unused territory. Over time, the map changes. It redraws itself based on use, experience, and even injury. It's like an adaptable atlas that keeps updating depending on traffic patterns. This same principle applies when a person learns a new skill that heavily involves a particular body part. Professional violinists, for instance, have been shown to have an enlarged cortical representation of their left-hand fingers. That's the hand used to press the strings with precision. Braille readers show expanded sensory maps for their fingertips. Dancers and athletes often have refined motor maps related to their specialty. The brain rewards repeated use with more dedicated space. It's a classic case of use it or lose it, but flipped to use it and grow it. Even imagined movement can cause change. In studies involving amputees or stroke patients, those who visualized moving a missing or paralyzed limb often showed activation in the corresponding motor and sensory areas. The brain doesn't always require physical feedback to update its maps. It sometimes just needs the intention or imagination of movement. That's why therapies like mirror therapy, which trick the brain into seeing a missing limb, can sometimes help reduce phantom limb pain or improve motor recovery. This flexibility is one of the most extraordinary aspects of the human brain. It means we're never fully hardwired. We're always in flux, always refining our internal maps. And while we may not consciously sense it happening, every time we learn a new skill, recover from an injury, or explore a new texture, the homunculus quietly shifts behind the scenes. The somatosensory cortex is also organized in a very specific way. It's topographically mapped. This means neighboring parts of the body are represented by neighboring neurons in the brain. So the hand is near the arm, which is near the shoulder, and so on. This layout helps the brain process tactile information in a coherent, spatially logical manner. It's like a neighborhood, with each sensory region living on the same side of the street as its anatomical cousin. Of course, this topography sometimes leads to fascinating phenomena. For example, in some individuals who've lost a limb, touching their face may cause sensations that feel like they're coming from the missing limb. This occurs because the facial and limb areas are neighbours in the cortex, and when one is deprived of input, the other can expand into that empty space. The homunculus also serves as a reminder of just how embodied our sense of self really is. We often think of consciousness as something floating behind the eyes, separate from the body, but the very structure of our brain suggests otherwise. Our mental landscape is deeply rooted in physical sensation. The body isn't just a vehicle, it's part of the mind's architecture. Even language reflects this entanglement. We say we have a gut feeling, a heavy heart, or that something feels right. These aren't just poetic phrases. They're hints at the way our brains map emotion and experience onto the body. Studies have shown that emotions light up specific regions of the body in consistent patterns. Fear, for instance, tends to be felt in the chest and gut. Joy radiates through the chest and head. These patterns mirror how the brain encodes and accesses bodily sensation. What the homunculus shows us more than anything is that perception is not evenly distributed. Your experience of your body is not a democratic system. It's a biased, beautifully optimized hierarchy. Your fingertips are sensory royalty. Your back, more of a quiet backbencher. And that's okay. It reflects what we need to survive, communicate, and explore the world. There's also something oddly charming about the visual of the homunculus itself. This squat, bug-eyed figure with massive lips and flailing hands is a strange mascot for neuroscience, but he's oddly endearing. He reminds us that the brain doesn't care about symmetry or elegance, it cares about function. The parts that do more get more. It's not always fair, but it is efficient. And while the homunculus may be a caricature, the science behind him is no joke. He represents decades of research, brain mapping, and clinical observation. He's been a guide for neurosurgeons during delicate operations, a teaching tool in medical schools, and a symbol of the brain's dynamic relationship with the body. So the next time you marvel at how quickly your fingers dance across a keyboard, or how your lips form words without effort, remember, those body parts take up a lot of real estate upstairs. They've earned their space on the map. And while the homunculus may be odd-looking, he's a portrait of how deeply your brain loves your body, down to every last twitch, tickle, and tap. Somewhere high above the forests of northern Europe, a tiny robin is navigating its way across continents. No GPS, no maps, just instinct and something else, something quietly astonishing. That robin, like many migratory birds, can feel the Earth's magnetic field. Not metaphorically, but literally. It's called magnetoreception, and it's one of the many hidden senses that animals possess. Senses that go far beyond the 5 we tend to focus on in humans. In humans, we already know there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. But animals, they're playing an entirely different sensory game. Let's explore some of their hidden talents, and what they reveal about how senses evolved to suit the world an organism inhabits. Let's start with that magnetic sense. Birds, especially migratory ones, have special cells believed to contain tiny crystals of magnetite, a naturally magnetic mineral. These crystals respond to Earth's magnetic field and help birds maintain their bearings, even in complete darkness or dense cloud cover. There's also evidence that some birds may literally see magnetic fields overlaid onto their vision, possibly in shades of blue or yellow. Imagine flying through the sky and having an internal compass baked right into your visual field. That's a level of built-in navigation even the best smartphones can't match. But birds aren't alone in this. Sea turtles, salmon, and even some bacteria possess magnetic sensitivity. It helps them migrate, navigate, or orient themselves to the surface of the Earth. The fact that such a sense evolved in so many unrelated organisms suggests that magnetoreception is not a quirky bonus. It's a powerful evolutionary advantage. The only reason we don't notice it is because we never had much need for it. Now, shift to the underbrush, where a snake is coiled silently, waiting. Specifically, a pit viper. These snakes have infrared sensing pits between their eyes and nostrils, allowing them to detect the body heat of prey animals, even in total darkness. To them, warm-blooded creatures shine like little thermal lanterns. It's not exactly vision, it's a separate thermal sense altogether. While we rely on nightlights and flashlights, snakes come equipped with a built-in heat camera. This heat detection is so sensitive that a pit viper can strike accurately at a mouse based purely on its thermal signature. Some beetles too have heat-sensing abilities, especially those that lay eggs in freshly burned wood. They use this sense to find recently scorched trees, often from kilometers away, by detecting the infrared heat still radiating from the charred bark. Then there's the aquatic realm, where fish reveal even stranger superpowers. Sharks and rays, for example, have electroreception, the ability to sense the faint electric fields generated by the muscle contractions of other animals. This sense allows them to hunt prey buried under sand or navigate murky waters where vision is useless. The organs responsible for this are called the ampullae of Lorenzini, which are essentially small gel-filled canals scattered around the head and snout. Other fish, like those in the carp family, rely on a lateral line system, a pressure-sensing network that runs along the sides of their bodies. It allows them to detect subtle changes in water flow, the movements of nearby fish, or the approach of predators. It's like having an invisible radar system, constantly tuned to the texture and vibration of the surrounding environment. Insects, too, have their own set of hidden sensory tricks. Moths can detect pheromones released by potential mates from kilometers away. Some can even hear the echolocation clicks of bats and take evasive action mid-flight. Bees can see ultraviolet patterns on flowers that are completely invisible to human eyes, markings that guide them straight to nectar. Even mammals get in on the sensory extravaganza. Elephants can detect seismic vibrations through their feet, essentially hearing distant sounds through the ground. Some studies suggest they may use this to detect thunderstorms, distant herds, or even incoming danger. Star-nosed moles, meanwhile, boast the most sensitive touch organ in the animal kingdom. A fleshy, star-shaped nose bristling with over 25,000 sensory receptors. It allows them to identify and eat prey faster than the human eye can blink. So what do all these examples have in common? They show that senses aren't limited to just a handful of types. Evolution doesn't care about neat categories, it cares about survival. If a new sensory tool helps an animal find food, avoid danger, or reproduce, then nature will find a way to build it. And perhaps most intriguingly, many of these animal senses aren't entirely absent in humans. They're just dialed way down. Magnetoreception, for example, might exist in a primitive form in us. Some experiments suggest that humans may have subtle, unconscious responses to magnetic field changes, although this remains hotly debated. Our skin contains pressure receptors, our eyes respond to different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and our ears can pick up vibrations beyond speech. We may simply lack the tuning or amplification that other animals have perfected. This brings up an interesting philosophical question. How much of the world is passing us by, completely unnoticed? If we had infrared eyes or electrosensitive fingertips, how different would reality feel? What would the night look like? What would the ocean sound like? Our perception of reality is limited by our sensory window, like looking at the universe through a keyhole. Other animals with their expanded suites of senses peek through entirely different keyholes and see a world that is vibrant in ways we can only imagine. In this light, the idea of superior senses becomes meaningless. A dog's nose is a miracle of detection, but it wouldn't help much if you were trying to spot ripe fruit in a forest. A bat's echolocation is exquisite in darkness, but pointless under sunlight. Every animal is tuned to the demands of its niche, shaped by pressures over millions of years to sense exactly what it needs to survive. Our own hidden senses, like proprioception, balance, and interoception, are part of that same evolutionary toolkit. They may not seem glamorous compared to magnetic compasses or heat vision, but they serve us every second of the day. They keep us upright, centered, fed, cooled, and safe. They let us dance, run, rest, and hug. Just because they whisper instead of shout doesn't make them any less vital. In the end, evolution is not about showing off, it's about function. The robin doesn't brag about its magnetic map. The snake doesn't gloat over its thermal scope. These abilities are tools, honed by necessity, tested by time. They remind us that nature is always inventing, quietly, efficiently, and sometimes in the most unexpected places. So while humans may never navigate by starlight or sense the heartbeat of a hidden mouse, we are part of the same sensory story. A story written across scales and species, composed in nerve endings and neurons. A story where every creature, from the humble worm to the soaring hawk, carries a unique way of knowing the world. Picture this. You're sitting still, eyes closed, not doing anything dramatic, just breathing. But then, as you settle, you begin to notice things. The rhythm of your breath, the gentle rise and fall of your chest, the soft buzz of tension in your shoulders, or the way your stomach flutters when a thought arises. You're not suddenly psychic, you're just paying attention. What you're tuning into is something ancient and deeply human. Interoception, the sense of the internal state of your body. And this is where meditation strolls in, with bare feet and a calm voice. Far from being just a spiritual or mystical practice, meditation, especially mindfulness-based meditation, is increasingly understood as a way to sharpen our internal senses. That's right. Sitting quietly and doing nothing can actually amplify your brain's awareness of what your body's doing. Let's talk about mindfulness. At its core, it's the practice of bringing your full attention to the present moment without judgment. That may sound simple enough, but the results are surprisingly profound. When you sit and focus on your breath or sensations in your body, you're essentially sending a polite invitation to your interoceptive system. Hey, you say, what's going on in there? In scientific terms, mindfulness enhances the activity in areas of the brain linked to interoception, especially the insular cortex. This region is like your body's radio tower. It receives internal sensory signals and helps interpret them. With practice, that signal becomes stronger and clearer. Studies using brain imaging show that long-term meditators often have increased grey matter density in the insula. That's right. Just by noticing your breath, you're remodeling your brain like a quiet little architect. One of the classic mindfulness practices is the body scan. This involves slowly moving your attention through the body, part by part from head to toe or vice versa. You don't move your body, you just notice it. Maybe your scalp feels tight, your jaw might be clenched, maybe your toes are colder than you expected. These tiny, quiet observations are the foundation of interoceptive awareness. Interestingly, people who regularly practice the body scan often report feeling more at home in their own bodies. They're better at detecting early signs of stress, illness, or fatigue. They become familiar with their own internal rhythms like heartbeat, breath, or digestion, without needing a doctor or a stethoscope. It's like upgrading your personal dashboard. Then there's breath tracking, simple in theory. You just observe your breath in and out like waves on a calm beach, not controlling it, just noticing. This is another gateway into interoception. Breathing is a unique physiological function because it's both automatic and voluntary. That makes it the perfect training ground for learning to feel what's normally invisible. The more you notice the breath, its pace, its depth, the slight pause between inhale and exhale, the more you begin to notice everything else riding along with it. Emotions, for example, often have a direct impact on breath. Anxiety tends to shorten it. Calm stretches it out. Anger can quicken it. Sadness can make it hitch. By observing your breath, you're often watching a real-time graph of your emotional state. Another key practice is grounding. This involves using your senses, especially tactile and proprioceptive input, to anchor your attention in the present moment. It could be feeling your feet against the floor, noticing the weight of your body on a chair, or observing how your hands rest in your lap. These physical cues are like bookmarks that say, "You are here." They bring the wandering mind back into the steady world of the body. And this isn't just feel-good philosophy, it's measurable. Scientists have found that regular mindfulness training improves heartbeat detection accuracy. That's a test where you're asked to silently count your own heartbeats without touching your pulse or using a device. People who meditate regularly tend to get very good at this. Their brains are more finely attuned to subtle internal cues. This has real-world implications. Interoceptive awareness is linked to emotional regulation. People who are more in tune with their internal states are often better at managing stress, navigating difficult emotions, and recognizing when they need to rest. It's like having a better user manual for your own system. Of course, like anything else, it takes practice. The first few times you try to meditate, you might just notice how loud your brain is. A shopping list here, a memory there, maybe a sudden urge to rearrange your furniture. But over time the noise settles, not because the thoughts disappear, but because you stop getting caught up in them. You become the observer rather than the reactor. And it's important to say, this isn't about achieving some Zen perfection or never getting stressed again. It's more like turning on a light in a dim room. You can't control everything you find, but you can see it more clearly. That clarity helps you respond with more kindness, patience, and wisdom, both to yourself and the world around you. There's also something poetic about the idea that quiet attention can change perception. In a world obsessed with doing more, going faster, and reaching further, meditation invites us to feel more, go slower, and come closer, not outward, but inward, into the felt experience of being alive. In fact, there's a whole branch of research exploring how mindfulness practices could help individuals with sensory disorders, anxiety, chronic pain, or emotional dysregulation. While it's not a magical cure-all, it appears to help many people reconnect with bodily signals that had been dulled, ignored, or overwhelmed. For some, it's like being reintroduced to themselves. Interestingly, some traditions have practiced this kind of inner listening for thousands of years without needing MRI scans to back them up. Yogis, monks, and mystics have long described states of heightened body awareness, moments when the boundary between mind and body seems to dissolve. Now, neuroscience is catching up, confirming what ancient wisdom has hinted at all along. The body is not just a passive shell, but an active participant in consciousness, and you don't need to go on a silent retreat to experience this. Just a few minutes a day, checking in with your breath, noticing your posture, feeling the pulse in your fingers, can begin to shift your awareness. Over time, those little moments of presence begin to accumulate, like drops filling a cup. The act of sensing yourself, really feeling yourself from the inside, is a quiet, gentle revolution. It doesn't look impressive on the outside, you won't glow or levitate, but inwardly, it can be transformative. You become less a bundle of thoughts and more a whole organism, breathing, feeling, sensing, responding, fully human, fully here. So next time you find a moment of stillness, whether you're seated in meditation or just sipping tea and watching your breath fog a window, remember that there's a whole sensory world waiting inside. It doesn't shout, it doesn't flash, but it's always there, whispering, guiding, keeping you connected to the quiet miracle of being alive. Somewhere in a softly lit nursery, a baby is waving its arms in the air like a tiny symphony conductor. There's no audience, no music, just the thrilling mystery of its own moving limbs. It might not know what a hand is or why it keeps showing up in front of its face, but it's fascinated. That moment, as ordinary as it seems, is a milestone. It marks the earliest flickers of proprioception and interoception, our hidden senses beginning to come online. From the outside, it might seem like babies are just wriggling and flailing randomly, like warm, wobbly jelly beans. But every kick, every head tilt, every uncoordinated attempt to roll over is part of an enormous internal discovery project. They're building a map of their own body, pixel by pixel, sensation by sensation. Let's start with proprioception. This is the sense that tells you where your body is in space without looking. Adults rely on it constantly, when walking in the dark, typing without looking at the keyboard, or scratching an itch on the back of the head. For a baby, however, this sense isn't fully developed at birth. They don't yet know how big they are, where their limbs are positioned, or how to move them smoothly, which is why their movements often look like someone learning to pilot a marionette for the first time. In the early weeks of life, babies make jerky, spontaneous movements. They punch the air, kick their legs, and occasionally surprise themselves by touching their own face. These aren't just adorable moments for doting parents, they're essential training sessions for the nervous system. Every time a hand brushes a cheek or a toe kicks a blanket, the brain takes note. Ah, it says, that sensation came from me. Over time, as the brain gathers more information through movement and feedback, proprioception begins to stabilize. Babies start reaching for objects intentionally, tracking their hands with their eyes, and eventually discovering that they can interact with the world. That dangling mobile isn't just pretty, it can be hit, and when it moves, it means I did that. Now throw interoception into the mix, the sense of what's going on inside the body: hunger, fullness, warmth, cold, tiredness, the need to stretch, the feeling of breathing. These internal cues are there from the very beginning, but it takes time for infants to interpret them clearly. A newborn might feel discomfort and cry, but not know whether they're hungry, gassy, or simply bored with their current blanket situation. As their brain develops, they start to associate specific internal states with outcomes. This rumble in my belly goes away after a feeding. This tightness in my diaper means I'll feel better after someone changes me. It's all trial and error, really. A baby's day is a continuous cycle of sensations, reactions, and learning. Even something as basic as rolling over is a complex orchestration of muscle strength, spatial awareness, and sensory feedback. It usually happens somewhere between 4 and 6 months of age, and when it does, it's like a light bulb goes off. The baby suddenly realizes that it can change its position in space, that the world looks different from a new angle. That movement isn't just something that happens to them, it's something they can do. Then comes crawling, which involves not just limbs but a developing understanding of balance and coordination. Crawling is the great frontier of spatial independence. It teaches babies how to shift their weight, control their direction, and navigate obstacles. It also helps solidify the connection between vision and movement, a form of early multisensory integration. Proprioception and balance are deeply challenged in this stage. That's why babies topple over so much. Their sense of equilibrium is still developing, their muscles are catching up, and their body map is still under construction. If adults experienced that level of coordination unpredictability, we'd never leave the couch. Interestingly, falling is crucial. Every tumble provides feedback. That didn't work, the brain notes. Let's try something else. The cerebellum, the part of the brain that fine-tunes motor control, gets a solid workout. Over thousands of attempts, grabbing, crawling, wobbling, falling, the child's internal body map becomes more precise. Eventually, those early flails turn into confident steps, hand claps, and high fives. Somewhere around 18 months to 2 years of age, toddlers begin to show another remarkable milestone: mirror self-recognition. This is typically tested by putting a smudge of lipstick or a sticker on a toddler's forehead and placing them in front of a mirror. If the child touches their own forehead rather than the mirror, it means they recognize the reflection as themselves. This moment, seemingly simple, is profound. It signals a growing sense of body ownership, the understanding that this is me, that my body is not just an object among others, but a container for my experiences, my intentions, my feelings. Proprioception and interoception are both key to this development. Without a reliable sense of one's own physical form and internal states, that level of self-recognition would be nearly impossible. It's no surprise that when these hidden senses are delayed or disrupted, development can be affected. Some children with sensory processing disorders or autism spectrum conditions may struggle with proprioceptive or interoceptive integration. They might find it difficult to interpret their body signals accurately, leading to clumsiness, discomfort, or challenges with emotional regulation. But with support and sensory-rich environments, many kids can learn to navigate the world in their own unique ways. What's truly striking is how much of this early development happens without direct teaching. No one instructs a baby how to discover their knees. No one says, "You'll feel a tightness in your belly when you're hungry." It all emerges through exploration, movement, trial, and error. The body teaches itself slowly, beautifully, and persistently. And it doesn't end in childhood. Even adults continue to refine their body awareness throughout life. Through sports, dance, yoga, martial arts, or simply learning a new physical skill, we keep updating that body map. Some of us grow more attuned to our interoceptive cues over time, learning how to listen when our body whispers about stress or fatigue. Others need reminders to check in and re-establish that inner connection. In a way, our early years give us the blueprint, but the editing continues for a lifetime. So when you see a toddler staggering around like a very small and excitable pirate, know that beneath that adorable instability is an entire symphony of senses developing in real time. A brain figuring out how to live inside a body learning what it means to move through space, and a consciousness gently forming around the realization, I am here. This is me. Take a quiet moment and ask yourself, where do you end? Is it the edge of your skin? The tips of your fingers? The stretch of your breath? It's a surprisingly slippery question. Most of the time, we go about our lives with a clear, unquestioned sense that we have a body, that the body is ours, and that this is where we begin and end. But when we really pause and examine that feeling, things get interesting. Because the experience of being a self isn't just built from sight or sound. It's shaped by a chorus of hidden senses working quietly in the background. Your sense of self isn't fixed like a statue. It's more like a delicate hologram, constantly reconstructed from streams of sensory data. Proprioception tells you where your limbs are. Interoception whispers about your heartbeat, your stomach, your breath. Balance keeps you upright. Touch anchors you to the physical world. All these inputs blend into what feels like a single, seamless experience. I am in here. This is me. But none of it is as solid as it seems. Consider the rubber hand illusion, a well-known experiment in psychology. A volunteer sits with one hand hidden out of view and a fake rubber hand placed in front of them. If both the real hand and the fake one are stroked simultaneously, the brain begins to adopt the rubber hand as part of the body. The volunteer may feel as if the rubber hand is their own, flinch when it's threatened, even report a shift in body temperature or ownership. Nothing has changed physically, but the sensory cues were just convincing enough to trick the brain. That's the power and fragility of embodiment. Your sense of self is flexible. It adapts based on what your senses tell you, and not just in labs. Imagine wearing virtual reality goggles and seeing yourself from behind, or losing your balance briefly in the dark, or the strange feeling of waking up from a deep sleep and not knowing where your arms are. All of these moments remind us that body awareness is an ongoing construction project, not a given. Even the boundary between body and world isn't always so clear. Take tools, for instance. If you use a walking stick or play an instrument, your brain quickly extends its proprioceptive map to include it. You feel through the tool as if it's temporarily part of you. This phenomenon, called tool embodiment, isn't just poetic, it's measurable. Neural activity in the brain adjusts to include the object as an extension of the body, which means that functionally speaking, your sense of self is stretchable. Philosophers and scientists have been chewing on this for centuries. René Descartes drew a firm line between mind and body, famously declaring, "I think, therefore I am." But modern neuroscience suggests something much stranger. You feel, therefore you are. The raw, often unconscious sensations generated by your internal and external senses form the scaffolding for consciousness itself. Interoception plays a surprisingly big role here. Studies show that people who are more in tune with their internal signals, like their heartbeat or breath, tend to have a more grounded, consistent sense of self. They're also often more emotionally attuned, better at understanding their own moods and reactions. In contrast, disruptions to interoceptive awareness can contribute to feelings of dissociation, anxiety, or depersonalization. Those unsettling moments when you feel disconnected from your body, like a passenger in your own skin. It turns out that being embodied, really feeling your body from the inside, is one of the foundations of feeling real. This brings us to a strange but lovely idea. The body doesn't just carry consciousness, it helps create it. Without all these hidden senses feeding information into the system, there would be no map, no anchor, no here to be. You'd still have thoughts perhaps, but no sense of being someone experiencing them. Even illusions can teach us about this construction. In virtual reality, researchers have created body-swapping experiences where people temporarily feel as if they've become someone else. With carefully synchronized movements and visual cues, the brain buys into the new body. It's not permanent, of course, but it shows how malleable the sense of self truly is. Or take out-of-body experiences often reported during trauma, extreme fatigue, or certain neurological conditions. People describe floating above themselves, watching from afar, sometimes with astonishing clarity. These aren't signs of the soul taking flight. They're likely breakdowns or rewirings in the brain's integration of sensory information. When the hidden senses can't agree on where you are, the mind improvises. It's eerie, but also revealing. The self is a fragile agreement among a dozen different signals. Disrupt the harmony, and the you take for granted starts to shimmer. And yet, what an incredible thing it is, this ever-changing, self-updating body map. Without looking, you know when your legs are crossed. You feel the weight of your body in the chair. You notice when your stomach growls or your heart speeds up. You're receiving messages from dozens of sensors on the skin, in the joints, deep inside the organs, and turning them into a unified, seamless feeling of me. This is what the hidden senses teach us. That selfhood isn't a glowing orb in the brain or a fixed point in space. It's a process, a dialogue between the inside and the outside, a dance of chemistry, physics, and perception. It changes when we grow, when we age, when we're injured, when we meditate, when we dream. Some people describe moments of complete immersion during exercise, music, prayer, or even washing dishes, when the boundary between body and world softens. There's no narrator in the mind, just action, just sensation. The hidden senses are often in charge during these moments, not performing solo, but conducting quietly in the background. So where do you end? Is it the edge of your skin, or is it where sensation fades, or where awareness stops tracking? Maybe it's better to stop looking for the edges. Maybe selfhood isn't a line, but a field. Not something that ends, but something that blurs. A field of awareness shaped by signals, stretched by experience, softened by perception. You're not just living in your body, you are your body. And your body in turn is not a container. It's a conversation. The hidden senses don't just help you survive, they help you exist. They whisper constantly, you are here. Not in coordinates, but in warmth, in weight, in balance, in breath. In the deep, quiet knowing of being alive. Somewhere beneath your awareness, as you lie still and listen, a quiet orchestra is always playing. It hums in the background, soft and seamless, unnoticed unless you lean in and really try to hear it. This isn't music made with strings or flutes. It's something much older. It's the steady pulse of your heartbeat, the gentle pull of gravity, the way you just know where your arms are without looking. It's the subtle shift in your breath as you drift into calm, the quiet tightening in your stomach when something's wrong, the way your body sways slightly to keep you upright, even in sleep. It's the symphony of the hidden senses. All throughout this journey, we've explored the senses that don't usually get center stage. Not sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell, but the others, the silent ones. Proprioception, the internal map that lets you move gracefully. Interoception, the ancient awareness of your heartbeat, hunger, warmth, and breath. The balance kept by your inner ear. The stretch felt in your tendons. The messages sent from your gut. The strange moments when those signals go quiet or go rogue and remind you just how intricate and delicate it all really is. We've walked through the brain's body map, watched babies build their sense of self, and peeked into the peculiar world of phantom limbs and rubber hands. We've looked at animals that sense the magnetic fields of the earth, and reflected on the boundaries, if any, between your body and your mind. And at each turn, what we've seen is this. Your experience of being alive is not just painted by what you see or hear, but sculpted by what you feel, deeply and continuously, often without even realizing it. These hidden senses are not just background noise, they are the foundation. They anchor you to your body, shape your emotions, guide your movements, and quietly affirm your existence. Every decision, every step, every pause to breathe is touched by them. They form the felt texture of daily life, the quiet knowing that you are here, and how miraculous that is. To be stitched together from so many sensations, to walk upright, to feel hunger, to know your place in space, to experience the warm flush of a fever, the dizziness of a spin, or the calm clarity that comes from a deep exhale. None of these things come with flashing lights or grand announcements, but each one is a soft reminder that your body is alive, listening and speaking in a language older than words. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that it all happens without needing your attention. You don't have to remember to track your limbs when you walk. You don't need to consciously balance when you stand. You don't have to check a gauge to know when you're cold or full or tired. Your body just knows, and that knowing, silent, constant, wise, is part of who you are. So as this quiet journey winds to a close, I invite you to linger with that thought. Not to analyze it, not to solve it, just to feel it. Feel the gentle rhythm of your breath. Notice the weight of your body on the bed or the couch or the floor. Tune in, if you can, to your heartbeat or the soft hum of your own presence. You are here, and that in itself is extraordinary. If you're still awake, hello again. I hope this gentle dive into the hidden world of your senses brought you some curiosity, some peace, maybe even a new way of noticing yourself. And if you've already drifted into sleep, well, then your body is doing what it does best, tuning in, adjusting, keeping you safe and still without fanfare. As we part for now, I'll ask again, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it by your clock or your stars? I always love knowing how far these words travel and how many quiet rooms and sleepy minds they reach. If you've enjoyed this exploration, I would be so grateful if you gave it a gentle like, maybe even subscribed if you haven't already. It helps this little sleepy corner of the internet grow and lets me keep making these science stories just for you. But most of all, thank you for your time, your ears, your curiosity and your breath. Whether you're fully awake or floating in dreams, may your senses hold you gently and may your body always feel like home. Sleep well and good night.